Welcome, weary wanderer, to the peculiar and wonderful world of Elmore, where the extraordinary masquerades as ordinary and chaos dances, hand in hand with love. Tonight, we delve into the complete chronicles of the Watterson family, a household where a blue cat, a pink rabbit, and their three remarkable children navigate the beautiful absurdity of suburban life. This is a tale of unconventional families, endless adventures, and the unbreakable bonds that hold them together through every mishap and magical moment. So settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind drift through the warm, chaotic embrace of 43 Elmore Street. In the gentle hum of everyday life, where most love stories begin with grand gestures and dramatic declarations, the tale of Nicole Senecourt and Richard Buckley started in the most wonderfully ordinary of places, a modest DVD rental store tucked between a laundromat and a convenience store in the heart of Elmore. The fluorescent lights cast their familiar glow over endless rows of movies, their plastic cases worn smooth by countless hands, seeking entertainment and escape from the rhythms of daily existence. Nicole Senecourt was not a woman who left much to chance. At 22, she carried herself with the precise confidence of someone who had mapped out her entire future with the same methodical care that architects use when designing skyscrapers. Her pink fur was always perfectly groomed, her clothes pressed and professional, and her briefcase, a sleek black leather affair that had cost her 3 weeks of careful saving, contained detailed plans for a career that would take her from her current position as a junior associate at a mid-level marketing firm, the executive suites of corporate success. She had goals written in neat handwriting on index cards, color-coded and organized by timeline. By 25, she would be a senior associate. By 30, a vice president. By 35, she would have her own corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a secretary who would schedule her meetings and filter her calls. These were not dreams but certainties as far as Nicole was concerned. Stepping stones on a path she had constructed through sheer force of will and unwavering determination. Richard Buckley, on the other hand, was a creature of the present moment. At 24, he possessed the rare and beautiful gift of finding wonder in the smallest details of existence. He could spend 20 minutes marveling at the way dust motes danced in afternoon sunlight streaming through the store's front window, or become completely absorbed in reading the back of a movie case, not because he was particularly interested in the film, but because someone had taken the time to write those words, and he felt they deserved to be read with attention and respect. His orange fur was perpetually rumpled, not from carelessness, but from the constant motion of someone who lived life with the enthusiasm of a child discovering the world anew each day. His uniform, a simple polo shirt with the store's logo embroidered over the pocket, was often wrinkled because he forgot to take his clothes out of the dryer until hours after the cycle had finished, distracted by a particularly interesting cloud formation or the sound of birds singing outside his apartment window. Where Nicole saw the DVD store as a temporary inconvenience, a place to rent the occasional movie while building her career, Richard saw it as a treasure trove of human creativity and imagination. Every film on those shelves represented countless hours of people working together to tell stories, to make others laugh or cry or think or dream. He knew the regular customers by name, remembered their preferences, and would spend genuine time helping them find exactly the right movie for their mood or circumstances. The first time Nicole noticed Richard truly noticed him, rather than simply processing him as the employee who handled her transactions, was on a particularly frustrating Tuesday evening in late autumn. She had arrived at the store with her usual efficiency, having calculated exactly how much time she could spare from her evening schedule of report writing and strategic planning. She needed a movie for background noise while she worked. Something bland and undemanding that would not distract from her focus on the quarterly projections that were due the following morning. But the new releases she had intended to browse were completely picked over, leaving behind only titles that promised either too much excitement or too much emotional investment. She found herself standing in the middle of the store, briefcase in one hand and car keys in the other, feeling the precious minutes of her carefully scheduled evening slipping away like sand through her fingers. Richard appeared beside her with the quiet presence of someone who had been watching and waiting for the right moment to offer assistance. His approach was not the aggressive helpfulness of someone trying to make a sale, but the gentle concern of someone who recognized distress and wanted to ease it if possible. "Rough day?" he asked, his voice carrying the kind of warmth that made strangers feel like old friends. He had noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her ears were pinned back slightly in frustration, the rapid tapping of her foot against the store's worn carpet. Nicole's first instinct was to deflect with the polite efficiency that served her so well in business settings. She was fine. She was just looking for something specific. She would figure it out herself. But something in Richard's genuine concern, in the way he waited patiently for her actual answer, rather than rushing to fill the silence, made her pause and consider giving an honest response. "I just need something I can ignore," she said, surprising herself with the admission. "Something that will not demand my attention while I work on these reports." She gestured vaguely with her briefcase, as if it contained all the frustrations of her day, rather than just papers and plans and the weight of her own expectations. Richard's face lit up with the particular joy of someone who has been presented with a problem he knows exactly how to solve. He did not immediately rush off to grab the first boring movie he could think of, but instead asked follow-up questions with the patience of someone who understood that finding the right film was not just about genre or plot, but about matching the viewer's emotional needs with the story's emotional offering. What kind of reports was she working on? Were they the sort that required deep concentration, or just methodical data entry? Did she prefer voices she recognized, which might be soothing, or unfamiliar ones that would be easier to tune out? Was she the kind of person who got distracted by music, or did instrumental scores actually help her focus? These were not questions Nicole had ever considered, but Richard's genuine interest in finding her the perfect solution made her think about her own preferences in ways that felt both novel and surprisingly pleasant. She found herself describing her work habits and her evening routine to this gentle stranger who listened as if her minor rental dilemma was the most important problem he had encountered all day. 20 minutes later, Nicole left the store with a documentary about the migration patterns of Arctic birds, something Richard had chosen because it had beautiful visuals and a narrator with a soothing voice, but covered material scientific enough that her analytical mind would not be tempted to follow the narrative too closely. It was perfect background material for someone who needed just enough stimulation to feel engaged without enough drama to cause distraction. But more than the perfect movie recommendation, she left with something she had not expected to find in a rental store on a Tuesday evening. A memory of someone listening to her, not because they wanted something from her, but because they genuinely cared about solving her problem in the way that would make her happiest. When Nicole returned the documentary 3 days later, she made a point of seeking out Richard to thank him for the recommendation. It had been exactly what she needed, she told him, allowing her to complete her reports ahead of schedule while feeling calm and focused, instead of frazzled and stressed. She had even learned some interesting facts about bird migration that she found herself sharing with colleagues during coffee breaks. Richard's reaction to her thanks was so genuine and delighted that Nicole felt something warm and unfamiliar settle in her chest. He did not accept her gratitude with the professional politeness of someone just doing their job, but with the pure joy of someone who had successfully helped another person and found that help appreciated. His happiness at her satisfaction seemed entirely disproportionate to the small service he had provided, yet somehow completely appropriate to the moment they were sharing. That second conversation lasted longer than the first, though neither of them had intended it to happen that way. Nicole found herself asking about other movies, not because she needed recommendations, but because she enjoyed watching Richard's face light up as he described the stories and characters that had captured his imagination. He spoke about films the way other people spoke about dear friends, with affection and insight, and the kind of intimate knowledge that comes from paying careful attention over time. Richard, for his part, found himself drawn to Nicole's intensity and focus in ways he could not quite articulate. There was something beautiful about the way she approached problems, breaking them down into manageable components and working through them with methodical precision. Her mind moved quickly and efficiently, but not in a way that made others feel slow or inadequate. Instead, her competence felt like a gift she was willing to share, a strength she would use to help others, rather than to diminish them. As autumn turned to winter and Nicole's weekly movie rentals became a regular part of her routine, their conversations evolved from practical exchanges about film recommendations to genuine discussions about their different approaches to life and work and the future they each imagined for themselves. These were not dramatic, soul-bearing conversations, but the gradual sharing of perspectives that happens when two people discover they enjoy each other's company and want to understand each other better. Nicole learned that Richard's apparent aimlessness was actually a form of deep contentment with the present moment, a philosophical approach to existence that prioritized happiness and kindness over achievement and advancement. He was not lazy or unmotivated, as she had initially assumed, but operating from a completely different value system that measured success in terms of relationships and experiences rather than titles and salaries. Richard discovered that Nicole's drive and ambition were not symptoms of dissatisfaction or greed, but expressions of a deep desire to build something meaningful and lasting, to use her talents and intelligence in ways that would make a positive difference in the world. Her plans and goals were not limitations but scaffolding, structures that would support the life she wanted to create for herself and eventually for others. Their friendship deepened gradually, through shared jokes and small kindnesses, through Richard's patient listening when Nicole needed to vent about workplace frustrations and Nicole's genuine interest in Richard's observations about human nature and the small miracles of daily life. They began to look forward to their weekly encounters at the DVD store, then to seek out additional opportunities to spend time together. It was Richard who suggested they meet for coffee one Saturday afternoon, not as a date but as friends who had discovered they enjoyed talking to each other and wanted more time for conversation than the brief exchanges at the rental counter allowed. Nicole agreed with the same practical enthusiasm she brought to most decisions. It made sense. They had common interests, and she found his company both relaxing and stimulating in ways that surprised her. That first coffee meeting lasted 4 hours, though neither of them noticed the passage of time until the cafe staff began stacking chairs around them. They talked about movies and books, about their childhoods and their dreams, about the things that made them laugh, and the experiences that had shaped their understanding of the world. Nicole found herself sharing stories about her family and her struggles with self-doubt that she had never told anyone else, while Richard opened up about his own insecurities and the loneliness that sometimes came with seeing the world so differently from most people around him. By the time spring arrived in Elmore, bringing with it longer days and the promise of new beginnings, Nicole and Richard had acknowledged that their friendship had grown into something deeper and more complex. They had not planned to fall in love. Neither of them had been looking for romance, but their connection had developed its own momentum that seemed to transcend their individual intentions or expectations. Richard's proposal, when it came, was as gentle and thoughtful as everything else about him. It happened on an ordinary Thursday evening while they were walking through the park near Nicole's apartment, discussing their plans for the weekend and debating the merits of various restaurants they might try for dinner. He stopped beside a bench where an elderly couple was feeding ducks, their movements synchronized by decades of shared routine, and told Nicole that he wanted to spend the rest of his life learning how to make her happy. It was not the dramatic declaration Nicole had always imagined, receiving no grand gestures or elaborate preparations, just Richard's quiet certainty that they belonged together and his desire to build a future based on the love and understanding they had already begun to create. He had no ring to offer, no detailed plans for a wedding or a timeline for their engagement, just the simple truth that he loved her completely and wanted to commit his life to their shared happiness. Nicole's acceptance came with tears that surprised them both, not tears of overwhelming emotion, but tears of recognition, the deep satisfaction of finding something she had not even realized she was searching for. She had built her entire adult life around the pursuit of professional success and financial security, but Richard's love offered her something far more valuable: acceptance, partnership, and the promise of a family built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Their wedding was small and practical, reflecting their shared preference for meaningful simplicity over elaborate spectacle. They exchanged vows in the community center where they had attended a cooking class together, surrounded by the friends they had made as a couple, and the family members who had watched their relationship develop with joy and approval. Nicole wore a simple white dress she had chosen for comfort rather than drama, while Richard's suit was the first he had ever owned, purchased specifically for the occasion and worn with the pride of someone marking the most important day of his life. Their vows were personal and honest, promises to support each other's dreams while building new dreams together, to love each other through the challenges and changes that lay ahead, to create a family based on kindness and acceptance, and the belief that two different people could become stronger together than either would be alone. The early days of their marriage were marked by the pleasant challenges of learning to share space and routines, of combining Nicole's organized efficiency with Richard's spontaneous approach to household management. They discovered that their different strengths complemented each other in ways that made their daily life both more effective and more enjoyable. Nicole's natural leadership abilities and strategic thinking helped them establish financial stability and long-term planning, while Richard's emotional intelligence and capacity for joy ensured that their focus on practical matters never overwhelmed their appreciation for the simple pleasures of married life. They learned to navigate disagreements with patience and humor, to support each other through workplace stress and family obligations, to maintain their individual identities while building a shared life that reflected both of their values and priorities. When they began discussing the possibility of children, Nicole approached the decision with the same methodical analysis she brought to all major life choices. She researched parenting methods and child development, calculated the financial implications of expanding their family, and developed detailed plans for balancing career responsibilities with the demands of raising children. Richard's approach to potential parenthood was characteristically different. He simply knew that he wanted to share the love and wonder he had found with Nicole by creating new life that would be nurtured by their combined devotion and care. He imagined teaching children to find magic in everyday moments, to approach the world with curiosity and kindness, to value relationships and experiences over material possessions and social status. Their conversations about starting a family revealed both their compatibility and their complementary perspectives. Nicole's practical concerns about timing and resources were balanced by Richard's emotional readiness and enthusiasm, while his optimistic assumptions about their parenting abilities were grounded by her realistic assessments of the challenges they would face. In the end, their decision to have children came not from careful planning or passionate longing, but from the gradual recognition that their love had grown large enough to embrace new life and strong enough to provide the foundation that children would need to flourish. They were ready not because they had all the answers, but because they had learned to find answers together, to face uncertainty with mutual support, and to trust that their commitment to each other would sustain them through whatever challenges parenthood might bring. As they prepared for the arrival of their first child, Nicole and Richard transformed their small apartment into a nursery, with the same care and attention they had brought to building their relationship. Every decision was made through discussion and compromise. Every purchase was considered from multiple perspectives. Every preparation was undertaken with the awareness that they were not just adding to their family, but beginning an entirely new chapter of their shared story. The foundation they had built together, love tempered by realism, dreams supported by practical planning, individual strengths united in common purpose, would soon be tested and strengthened by the arrival of a small blue kitten who would bring chaos and joy in equal measure to their carefully ordered lives. But that transformation still lay ahead, waiting in the future like a gift they had not yet learned to unwrap. For now, Nicole and Richard Watterson stood together at the threshold of parenthood, their hands intertwined and their hearts open, ready to discover what kind of family they could create together and what kind of parents they could become through the alchemy of love, patience, and the willingness to grow alongside the children they would raise. The birth of Gumball Christopher Watterson arrived like a small blue miracle on a Tuesday morning in early spring, when the cherry trees outside the hospital windows were just beginning to bloom and the air carried the promise of renewal and fresh beginnings. Nicole had approached childbirth with the same methodical preparation she brought to every major life event, reading countless books on labor and delivery, attending every prenatal class the hospital offered, and creating detailed birth plans that accounted for multiple contingencies and possible complications. Richard, characteristically, had prepared for fatherhood in his own gentle way by talking to the baby every night while Nicole slept, sharing stories about the world their child would soon discover, and making promises about all the wonders they would explore together. He had practiced swaddling techniques on stuffed animals with the same patient dedication he brought to learning new skills, and had filled their freezer with homemade meals that Nicole could reheat during the exhausting early weeks of new parenthood. The labor itself had been long and challenging, testing Nicole's strength and determination in ways that no amount of preparation could have fully anticipated. But Richard never left her side, offering water and encouragement and the steady presence of someone whose love remained constant, even when everything else felt uncertain and overwhelming. His hand in hers became her anchor through each contraction, his voice a soothing counterpoint to the clinical efficiency of the medical staff surrounding them. When Gumball finally made his entrance into the world, his first action was not the expected cry of distress, but a curious mewing sound that seemed more like a question than a complaint, as if he were asking whether this bright, noisy new environment was really where he was supposed to be. His eyes opened immediately, revealing the distinctive blue color that would become his most recognizable feature, and he gazed around the delivery room with an alertness that suggested he was already taking inventory of his surroundings and planning his first adventure. The doctors and nurses commented on how active and responsive the newborn seemed, how quickly he began moving his tiny limbs and turning his head toward voices and sounds. Nicole, exhausted but exhilarated, held her son against her chest and felt the immediate rush of protective love that seemed to expand her heart beyond any size she had thought possible. This small, perfect creature was theirs, to love and guide and protect, a responsibility that felt both overwhelming and completely natural. Richard's first words upon seeing his son were not the conventional expressions of joy and pride that new fathers typically offer, but a gentle greeting spoken directly to the baby himself. "Hello there, little guy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We have been waiting to meet you for such a long time. Welcome to the world. We are going to have so many adventures together." The early days with newborn Gumball revealed both his extraordinary nature and the ways his arrival would transform the careful routines Nicole and Richard had established during their married life. Sleep became a precious commodity, available only in scattered fragments. Feeding schedules dominated their days and nights, and their previously organized home was gradually overtaken by the countless supplies and equipment that modern babies seem to require. Yet, beneath the chaos and exhaustion, there was also a profound sense of completion, as if their family had finally achieved its intended shape. Gumball was not an easy baby in conventional terms. He rarely slept for more than 2 hours at a stretch. He seemed to find fascinating entertainment in activities that most infants ignored, and he displayed an early preference for being held and carried, rather than lying peacefully in his crib or bassinet. But his alertness and curiosity made every interaction feel like a conversation, even before he could speak or understand language in any conventional sense. His eyes would follow his parents around the room with obvious interest. His tiny hands would reach toward colorful objects or interesting textures, and his expressions conveyed such clear communication that Nicole and Richard found themselves responding to his unspoken questions and comments as if he were already participating in family discussions. Richard proved to have a natural intuition for infant care that surprised everyone, including himself, while Nicole approached baby care with her characteristic attention to detail and systematic methodology. Richard seemed to understand Gumball's needs through some form of emotional telepathy that allowed him to know exactly when the baby was hungry, tired, overstimulated, or simply in need of comfort and attention. His lullabies were rambling, improvised songs about everything he could see, from the nursery window birds building nests in the oak tree, clouds shaped like animals drifting across the sky, the neighbor's cat stalking insects in the garden below. Gumball would listen to these musical commentaries with rapt attention, his eyes wide and unblinking, as if he were absorbing not just the sound of his father's voice, but the entire worldview it represented. Nicole's approach to motherhood was more structured but equally devoted. She tracked feeding times and sleep patterns with scientific precision, researched every concern or question that arose, and gradually developed a comprehensive understanding of her son's preferences and needs that allowed her to anticipate problems before they became crises. Her natural leadership abilities translated seamlessly into the complex logistics of infant care, while her fierce protectiveness ensured that Gumball's safety and well-being took priority over every other consideration. As Gumball grew from newborn to infant, his personality began to emerge in ways that both delighted and occasionally challenged his parents. He was intensely curious about everything in his environment, reaching for objects that caught his interest with single-minded determination, and expressing clear frustration when barriers prevented him from exploring whatever had captured his attention. His first laugh came at 6 weeks old, not in response to the typical baby entertainment of peekaboo or funny faces, but while watching Richard attempt to fold laundry, a task that Richard approached with such gentle incompetence that it apparently struck his son as absolutely hilarious. The sound of that first genuine belly laugh filled the apartment with such joy that Nicole and Richard found themselves creating increasingly elaborate domestic mishaps just to hear it again. By 3 months, Gumball was demonstrating the remarkable physical coordination that would characterize his entire childhood. He could roll from back to front and front to back with the fluid grace of someone who found movement to be the most natural thing in the world, and he showed no fear of heights or speeds that would have concerned more cautious children. His favorite activity was being carried around the apartment at shoulder height, where he could survey his domain like a tiny blue emperor and point imperiously at anything that required his immediate investigation. His sleep patterns, or lack thereof, became legendary among Nicole and Richard's friends and family. Gumball seemed to operate on some internal schedule that bore no relationship to day and night, conventional meal times, or his parents' need for rest and recovery. He would be alert and playful at 3 a.m, demanding entertainment and social interaction, then fall deeply asleep during the busy afternoon hours when Nicole and Richard most needed him to be awake and engaged. Rather than fighting against their son's unconventional rhythms, Nicole and Richard gradually adapted their own schedules to accommodate his preferences. Nicole learned to use his afternoon naps for catching up on work she brought home from the office, while Richard discovered that the quiet pre-dawn hours when Gumball was most alert were perfect for the kind of unhurried, philosophical conversations he enjoyed having with his son about life and love and the mysterious workings of the universe. These early morning dialogues became one of the defining features of Gumball's infancy. Richard would carry his son to the living room window, where they could watch the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, while discussing the important questions that occurred to a man trying to explain the world to someone who was encountering it for the first time. "You see that bird out there, Gumball?" Richard would say, pointing to a robin searching for worms in their small front yard. "She is looking for breakfast, just like we do every morning, but she does not have to worry about whether she remembered to buy groceries or if the milk has gone bad. She just knows that if she looks hard enough, she will find what she needs. There is something beautiful about trusting the world to provide for you, do you not think?" Gumball would respond with the serious attention he gave to all of his father's observations, his blue eyes following the bird's movements while his tiny hands gestured in what appeared to be meaningful commentary on the philosophical implications of avian breakfast hunting. These conversations laid the foundation for the deep bond that would develop between father and son, built on Richard's belief that even the smallest person deserved to be treated as a complete individual, worthy of respect and genuine engagement. Nicole's relationship with baby Gumball was characterized by a different but equally profound connection. While Richard provided philosophical guidance and emotional security, Nicole became Gumball's introduction to the practical skills and knowledge he would need to navigate the world successfully. She taught him to recognize his own name, to respond to simple commands, and to understand the basic cause and effect relationships that govern daily life. Her approach was systematic but never cold, breaking down complex concepts into manageable pieces that her son could absorb and master at his own pace. When Gumball showed interest in the colorful books she read to him, Nicole began incorporating lessons about letters and sounds into their bedtime routine. When he demonstrated fascination with the kitchen appliances, she found safe ways for him to observe and eventually participate in food preparation and cooking activities. The first clear sign that Gumball was destined to be something other than an ordinary child came when he was 8 months old, and Nicole found him sitting in his crib having what appeared to be a detailed conversation with a dust bunny that had somehow escaped her usually meticulous housekeeping. The conversation was entirely one-sided from any external perspective, but Gumball's facial expressions and vocal inflections suggested that he was receiving responses to his comments and questions from his unusual conversational partner. When Nicole mentioned this incident to Richard, expecting him to share her concern about possible developmental issues, his reaction was characteristically different. "Maybe he is just more aware of things than we realize," Richard suggested. "Maybe there are conversations happening all around us all the time, and most of us just learn to ignore them as we get older." It would be nice if Gumball never has to lose that ability. As Gumball's first birthday approached, his parents began to recognize that their son possessed an imagination and creativity that operated on a completely different level from what they had expected based on their reading about normal child development. His play was elaborate and theatrical, involving complex storylines and character interactions that seemed to spring fully formed from his mind without any apparent source or inspiration. A simple cardboard box would become a spaceship, a castle, a submarine, and a time machine within the span of a single afternoon, with Gumball providing detailed narration about the adventures taking place in each incarnation. His stuffed animals were not just toys, but fully realized characters with distinct personalities, preferences, and relationships that remained consistent from one play session to the next. Richard delighted in these displays of creativity, often joining Gumball's games as an enthusiastic participant rather than an adult supervisor. Together, they would transform the living room into alien planets, underwater kingdoms, or magical forests where ordinary furniture became the landscape for extraordinary adventures. Nicole watched these father-son collaborations with a mixture of amazement and gentle concern, wondering whether she should be encouraging more structured, educational activities instead of what appeared to be pure fantasy and make-believe. But as she observed the joy and confidence that these imaginative games brought to both her husband and her son, Nicole began to understand that creativity and imagination were not frivolous distractions from serious learning, but essential components of the kind of education that would prepare Gumball for whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead in his unique life. The celebration of Gumball's first birthday marked not just the completion of his first year of life, but the recognition that the Watterson family had successfully adapted to include this extraordinary little person who brought both chaos and wonder to everything he touched. The party was small and intimate, attended by close friends and family members who had watched Gumball's development with fascination and affection. Instead of the traditional party games and entertainment that most one-year-olds would have enjoyed, Gumball was most interested in the wrapping paper and cardboard boxes that had contained his gifts, transforming them into an elaborate fort that served as the centerpiece for an adventure involving pirates, treasure, and a rescue mission that required the participation of every adult present. Nicole and Richard watched their son orchestrate this complex play scenario with the same pride and amazement they might have felt watching him take his first steps or speak his first words. They were beginning to understand that Gumball's childhood would be unlike anything they had expected or prepared for, but that his unique perspective on the world would enrich their family in ways they were only beginning to discover. As the evening wound down, and Gumball finally succumbed to exhaustion from the excitement of his birthday celebration, Nicole and Richard tucked him into his crib and stood together watching him sleep, their hearts full of love and anticipation for all the adventures that lay ahead. They had learned that being parents to this remarkable child would require them to be more flexible, more creative, and more open to wonder than they had ever imagined. But they were ready for the challenge. The foundation they had built together, their love for each other, their commitment to supporting their family through any difficulty, their willingness to grow and change as circumstances required would serve them well in the years to come as Gumball's creativity and energy continued to transform their quiet suburban life into something resembling a daily carnival of imagination and possibility. Their small blue son slept peacefully in his crib, already dreaming the vivid dreams that would fuel tomorrow's adventures, while outside his window, the world waited to be explored, questioned, and reimagined through the eyes of someone who had not yet learned that some things were supposed to be impossible. The arrival of Darwin into the Watterson household began not with fanfare or ceremony, but with the simple act of a father trying to make his 4-year-old son happy on an otherwise ordinary Saturday afternoon. Gumball had been fascinated by the goldfish in the pet store window for weeks, pressing his small blue nose against the glass whenever they passed during their weekly errands, watching the tiny orange creatures glide through their miniature underwater world, with the same rapt attention he gave to his favorite television programs. Richard had noticed his son's growing obsession with the fish, the way Gumball would slow his steps whenever they approached the pet store, craning his neck to catch glimpses of the aquatic display, even when they were supposedly hurrying to other destinations. There was something in the child's expression during these moments, a longing that went beyond simple desire for a new toy, that spoke to Richard's own memories of childhood wishes that had seemed impossibly important at the time. Nicole had initially been hesitant about adding a pet to their household, her practical mind immediately cataloguing all the additional responsibilities that would come with caring for another living creature. Fish tanks required regular cleaning, water temperature monitoring, proper feeding schedules, and the kind of consistent attention that their already chaotic family routine might not be able to accommodate. She worried about what would happen if they forgot to feed the fish, if the tank became dirty, if Gumball's interest waned after the initial excitement wore off. But Richard's gentle persistence, combined with Gumball's unwavering enthusiasm, eventually wore down her objections. The compromise they reached was typical of their family's approach to major decisions. They would start with one fish, the smallest commitment possible, and see how well they managed the responsibility before considering any expansion of their aquatic family. The fish they selected was distinguished from his bowl mates only by a slightly more vibrant orange color and what appeared to be a more alert expression, though Nicole privately wondered whether she was projecting human characteristics onto a creature whose facial features were probably incapable of conveying meaningful emotion. Gumball, however, was certain that this particular fish possessed a special quality that set him apart from all the others, an indefinable spark that made him the perfect addition to their family. The naming process revealed the depth of Gumball's attachment to his new pet. After rejecting dozens of conventional fish names, Nemo, Goldie, Flipper, Splash, he settled on Darwin with the same certainty he brought to all his creative decisions. When asked why he had chosen that particular name, Gumball offered an explanation that was both perfectly logical and completely incomprehensible. Because he looks like he is thinking about important things, and Darwin is a name for someone who thinks about important things. Neither Nicole nor Richard had the heart to point out that their 4-year-old son probably had no real understanding of who Charles Darwin had been, or why his name might be appropriate for a goldfish. The choice felt right to Gumball, and that was sufficient justification for everyone involved. The first few weeks with Darwin followed the predictable pattern of new pet ownership. Gumball was fascinated by every aspect of fish care, insisting on being present for feeding times and water changes, pressing his face against the glass to observe Darwin's swimming patterns, and providing running commentary on his pet's activities that suggested he was observing complex behaviors invisible to adult eyes. Richard found himself drawn into elaborate discussions about Darwin's preferences and personality, conversations that felt entirely natural, despite their participants being a grown man and a small child talking about a goldfish who showed no obvious signs of having either preferences or personality. These talks often took place during the quiet evening hours when Nicole was working on projects from the office, father and son sitting cross-legged in front of the fish tank like meditation students contemplating some ancient wisdom. "Look at how he swims in circles," Gumball would observe, his voice filled with the kind of wonder that adults usually reserve for much grander spectacles. "He is not just swimming around because he is bored. He is exploring. Every time he goes around, he sees things from a different angle. That is very smart." Richard would nod seriously, as if this insight into goldfish behavior was a profound philosophical revelation worthy of careful consideration. "You are absolutely right, Gumball. Darwin is definitely the smartest fish I have ever met. I think he understands more about what is happening around here than we give him credit for. These conversations, which might have sounded absurd to outside observers, became one of the foundation stones of the extraordinary relationship that was developing between boy and fish. Gumball spoke to Darwin not as a pet owner addressing an animal, but as a friend sharing thoughts and experiences with someone who genuinely cared about his perspective on the world. Nicole watched these interactions with the bemused affection of someone observing a harmless eccentricity that brought obvious joy to her family. She had grown accustomed to Gumball's tendency to find deep meaning in everyday situations, and his intense connection with Darwin seemed like a natural extension of the creativity and empathy that characterized all his relationships. What none of them expected was that Darwin might actually be listening. The first sign that something unusual was happening came approximately 6 weeks after Darwin's arrival, when Nicole noticed that the fish seemed to be responding to Gumball's voice in ways that went beyond the normal feeding time excitement that most pets display when their owners approach. Darwin would swim to whatever side of the tank was closest to Gumball whenever the boy entered the room, following his movements with obvious attention and interest. More remarkably, Darwin began to show what appeared to be emotional responses to Gumball's moods and activities. When Gumball was excited about something, Darwin would swim in rapid, energetic circles that seemed to mirror his young owner's enthusiasm. When Gumball was sad or frustrated, Darwin would float near the bottom of the tank with a stillness that suggested sympathy or concern. Richard, with his characteristic openness to possibility and wonder, was the first family member to suggest that these behaviors might indicate something more significant than typical pet owner bonding. I think Darwin really understands what Gumball is saying to him, he told Nicole one evening after they had put their son to bed. Have you noticed how he always swims over when Gumball starts talking? It is like he does not want to miss anything. Nicole's initial reaction was skeptical, her scientific mind immediately generating logical explanations for what appeared to be extraordinary behavior. Fish were sensitive to vibrations and movement, she reasoned. Darwin was probably just responding to the sounds and visual stimuli that accompanied Gumball's presence, not actually comprehending the content of their conversations. But as the weeks passed and Darwin's responses became increasingly sophisticated and specific, even Nicole began to wonder whether something genuinely remarkable was taking place in their living room. The fish began to exhibit behaviors that seemed impossible to explain through conventional understanding of goldfish intelligence and capability. Darwin started showing preferences for different types of music played near his tank, swimming actively during upbeat songs and floating peacefully during slower, more contemplative pieces. He appeared to recognize different family members by sight, greeting each person with distinct swimming patterns that seemed tailored to their individual personalities and relationships with him. Most extraordinary of all, Darwin began to demonstrate what could only be described as problem-solving abilities. When his food flakes fell in areas of the tank that were difficult to reach, he would use his fins to create currents that would move the food to more accessible locations. When algae began growing on one section of the tank glass, blocking his view of the room, he systematically cleaned the area by repeatedly brushing against it until the obstruction was removed. These behaviors might have been dismissed as instinctual fish activities by casual observers, but the Watterson family had spent enough time watching Darwin to recognize that his actions were purposeful and intelligent in ways that transcended normal animal behavior. He was not just reacting to his environment, but actively manipulating it to achieve specific goals and outcomes. The transformation itself happened gradually, so slowly that no single moment could be identified as the precise point when Darwin ceased being a fish and became something unprecedented. It began with subtle changes in his physical appearance, his fins growing slightly larger and more expressive, his eyes becoming more prominent and alert, his overall body proportions shifting in ways that were almost imperceptible from day to day but unmistakable when considered over the course of several weeks. Gumball was the first to notice these changes, his artistic eye naturally attuned to visual details that adults might overlook. "Darwin looks different today," he announced one morning while observing his pet's swimming patterns. "He looks more like he is ready to come out and play with me, instead of just swimming around in there." Richard and Nicole examined the fish more closely, initially seeing nothing more than the same small orange goldfish they had brought home from the pet store months earlier. But as they continued to watch Darwin over the following days, they began to notice the subtle alterations that Gumball had detected, changes so gradual and natural that they seemed more like normal growth than any kind of extraordinary metamorphosis. The first external appendage to develop was what appeared to be a small bump on Darwin's lower body, positioned where legs might be expected on a terrestrial creature. This growth was initially so tiny that it could have been mistaken for a minor injury or natural variation in fish anatomy, but it continued to expand and take shape in ways that defied conventional biological explanation. Over the course of several weeks, this bump elongated and differentiated into what was unmistakably a rudimentary leg, complete with what appeared to be the beginnings of toes and a foot. A second appendage soon appeared on the opposite side of Darwin's body, developing at the same gradual pace and with the same impossible attention to anatomical detail. Throughout this period of physical transformation, Darwin continued to behave like a normal fish, swimming and eating and sleeping according to his established routines. The developing legs did not seem to interfere with his aquatic mobility, nor did they appear to cause him any discomfort or distress. If anything, he seemed more energetic and alert than before, as if the physical changes were accompanied by increased vitality and awareness. Nicole found herself torn between scientific fascination and parental concern as she watched these impossible developments unfold in her living room. Every rational part of her mind insisted that what she was witnessing could not be happening, that goldfish did not spontaneously develop mammalian appendages, that there had to be some logical explanation for the changes she was documenting with increasingly frequent photographs and detailed written observations. But the evidence of her own eyes was undeniable, and Darwin's continued health and happiness suggested that whatever was happening to him was a natural and beneficial process rather than some kind of disease or abnormality. She began researching evolutionary biology and metamorphosis, searching for scientific precedents that might explain how a fish could develop the characteristics of a land animal without any apparent external catalyst or intervention. Richard's response to Darwin's transformation was characteristically accepting and optimistic. Rather than questioning the impossibility of what they were witnessing, he focused on supporting Darwin through what was obviously a challenging and unprecedented experience. He began talking to the fish even more frequently, offering encouragement and reassurance during what he imagined must be a confusing and potentially frightening time. "You are doing great, Darwin," he would say while sitting beside the tank during the evening hours when the changes seemed most rapid and pronounced. "I know this must feel very strange, but do not worry. We are here with you, and we will help you figure out whatever comes next." Gumball is especially excited to see what kind of adventures you two will be able to have once you can walk around like the rest of us. Gumball himself approached Darwin's metamorphosis with the matter-of-fact acceptance that children often display when confronted with extraordinary circumstances. In his worldview, wonderful and impossible things happened all the time, so his pet fish growing legs was unusual but not fundamentally different from any of the other magical occurrences that filled his daily life. The development of Darwin's arms followed the same gradual pattern as his legs, beginning as small protrusions that slowly lengthened and articulated into fully functional limbs. With the addition of arms came the obvious question of what Darwin would do with these new appendages, and whether he would be able to use them effectively despite having no previous experience with terrestrial locomotion or manipulation. The first time Darwin successfully used his developing limbs to pull himself partway out of the water was a moment of triumph and terror for the entire Watterson family. They watched in amazement as their pet fish, now clearly something much more complex and extraordinary, lifted his head above the surface of his tank and took what appeared to be his first breath of air. The sound he made, a small, experimental noise that was part gasp and part vocalization, was unlike anything any of them had ever heard from a fish, but it was unmistakably a sound of satisfaction and discovery. Darwin was learning to breathe air, and the process seemed as natural to him as swimming had been during his purely aquatic phase of existence. Within days of his first successful air-breathing experiment, Darwin was spending increasing amounts of time with his head above water, observing the world beyond his tank with obvious curiosity and intelligence. His eyes, now clearly capable of focusing on objects at varying distances, would track the movements of family members around the room, and his expressions seemed to convey emotional responses to what he was seeing. The question of whether Darwin would be able to survive outside his aquatic environment became increasingly pressing as his terrestrial characteristics continued to develop. Nicole prepared a backup plan that included a larger tank with both water and dry areas, but Richard suggested that they might need to consider the possibility that Darwin was evolving beyond the need for a tank altogether. The morning when Darwin first climbed completely out of his tank and stood upright on the living room floor marked the completion of his transformation from pet fish to family member. His new form was unmistakably bipedal and humanoid, though retaining the orange coloration and basic proportions that identified him as the same creature who had swum in circles for months while Gumball provided philosophical commentary on his activities. His first words, spoken in a voice that was gentle and wondering, were addressed directly to Gumball. "Hi there, I have been wanting to talk to you for such a long time." The casual miracle of Darwin's speech, delivered with the same natural ease that characterized everything else about his transformation, finally convinced even Nicole that they were witnessing something that transcended conventional scientific understanding. This was not a biological anomaly or an unusual evolutionary development, but something closer to magic. The physical manifestation of love and connection so profound that it had somehow overcome the normal limitations of species and anatomy. Gumball's response to finally being able to have a two-way conversation with his beloved pet was pure joy. "Darwin, I knew you could understand everything I was saying. I have so many things I want to show you and so many places I want to take you. This is going to be the best thing ever." The practical challenges of integrating a newly bipedal former goldfish into their family routine were considerable, but the Wattersons approached them with the same creativity and determination they brought to all unusual circumstances. Darwin needed clothes, which required a shopping expedition that tested the limits of Nicole's ability to explain unusual requests to department store clerks. He needed to learn to walk with confidence and coordination, a process that Richard supervised with the patience of someone teaching a beloved child to take their first steps. Most importantly, Darwin needed to understand the social and legal complexities of his new existence. As far as the outside world was concerned, he was now a person rather than a pet, with all the rights and responsibilities that status entailed. Nicole spent hours researching the bureaucratic requirements for registering Darwin as a legal resident of their household, a process that required creativity and persistence in equal measure. The school district proved surprisingly accommodating when Nicole explained that her son's former pet fish had undergone spontaneous evolution and would need to be enrolled in kindergarten alongside Gumball. The administrator who handled their case seemed to treat Darwin's unusual origins as merely one more example of the diversity that modern education was expected to accommodate. Darwin's first day of school was as much a learning experience for the educational system as it was for him. His natural intelligence and eagerness to learn made him an excellent student, while his unique perspective on the world provided insights that enriched classroom discussions in unexpected ways. His teacher quickly recognized that Darwin's combination of innocence and wisdom made him a valuable addition to the class dynamic. The friendship between Gumball and Darwin, which had been one-sided during the aquatic phase of their relationship, blossomed into something extraordinary once two-way communication became possible. They were not just brothers, but best friends, confidants, and partners in every adventure that their combined imagination could conceive. Darwin's transformation from pet to family member was complete, not when he developed the ability to walk and talk, but when Nicole and Richard realized that they could no longer imagine their household without him, as an equal participant in all family activities and decisions. He was not their son's former pet who had undergone an unusual metamorphosis, but simply their second child, who happened to have arrived through unconventional means. The love that had originally motivated Richard to buy a goldfish for his son had somehow transcended the normal boundaries between species and relationships, creating something unprecedented and beautiful. Darwin's evolution was not a biological accident, but the physical manifestation of emotional bonds so strong that they had literally reshaped reality to accommodate their existence. As the Watterson family settled into their new configuration, with Darwin occupying the bedroom next to Gumball's and participating fully in household chores and family traditions, they began to understand that love was not limited by conventional definitions or expectations. Their family had been transformed by the simple act of accepting and nurturing connection wherever it appeared, regardless of how impossible or unlikely it might seem to outside observers. The miracle of Darwin's transformation would always remain a mystery to anyone seeking scientific explanations, but for the Wattersons, it was simply proof that the world was larger and more wonderful than most people dared to believe. In their household at 43 Elmore Street, impossible things happened regularly, but they happened because they were surrounded by the kind of unconditional love that made any transformation possible. The arrival of Anais Aurore Watterson came with none of the uncertainty that had characterized her parents' approach to their previous children, but rather with the methodical precision of someone who had already analyzed the situation thoroughly and reached definitive conclusions about how her life should proceed. Her birth, unlike Gumball's energetic entrance or Darwin's gradual metamorphosis, was marked by an almost businesslike efficiency that seemed to reflect her personality even in those first moments of existence. Nicole had approached her third pregnancy with the confidence of someone who had already navigated the challenges of early parenthood twice before, though she could not have anticipated that this child would present an entirely different set of parenting puzzles than anything she had encountered with her sons. The pregnancy itself had been textbook perfect, with every milestone achieved precisely on schedule, and every medical appointment confirming that mother and baby were developing exactly as expected. Richard, now a veteran father with years of experience in the gentle art of caring for extraordinary children, had prepared for Anais's arrival with his characteristic combination of practical readiness and emotional openness. He had repainted the nursery in soft pink tones, assembled a crib with the patient attention to detail that he brought to all important tasks, and filled the room with stuffed animals and picture books that would provide entertainment and comfort during the early months of her life. Gumball and Darwin, now 6 and 2 years old respectively, and inseparable best friends, had approached the prospect of a baby sister with the enthusiastic anticipation of children who assumed that all new family members would automatically become participants in their ongoing adventures. They had helped their father prepare the nursery, offered suggestions for potential names, and made elaborate plans for all the games and activities they would share with their new sibling once she was old enough to participate in their daily exploits. The labor that brought Anais into the world was notably shorter and less complicated than Nicole's previous experiences, as if this particular child was eager to begin her life and had no patience for unnecessary delays or inefficiencies. When she finally made her appearance on a crisp autumn morning, her first action was not crying but a careful visual survey of her surroundings, her large pink eyes taking in every detail of the delivery room with the systematic attention of someone conducting an inspection. Dr. Martinez, who had delivered both Gumball and assisted with the various medical questions that had arisen during Darwin's transformation, commented that he had never seen a newborn who seemed so alert and focused immediately after birth. Most babies required several minutes to adjust to their new environment, but Anais appeared to be cataloguing information and making assessments from the moment she drew her first breath. Her first cry, when it finally came, was not the instinctive wail of distress that typically announces a newborn's arrival, but a series of distinctly modulated sounds that seemed almost like an attempt at communication, rather than simple expression of discomfort or confusion. The nursing staff exchanged glances that suggested they too had noticed something unusual about this particular infant's behavior and vocalizations. Nicole's first impression of her daughter was of holding someone who was simultaneously completely helpless and utterly self-possessed, a tiny person who clearly had opinions about everything she was experiencing, but lacked the physical capabilities to express those opinions in conventional ways. Unlike Gumball, who had been all energy and movement from birth, or Darwin, who had radiated gentle curiosity, Anais seemed to be observing and analyzing everything around her with an intensity that was both impressive and slightly unnerving. Richard's initial interaction with his daughter followed the same pattern he had established with his previous children, a gentle introduction that acknowledged her as a complete person deserving of respect and individual attention. "Hello there, Anais," he said, his voice carrying the same warmth and welcome he had offered to Gumball and Darwin. "We have been looking forward to meeting you for such a long time. You have two big brothers who are very excited to show you all their favorite things." But where Gumball had responded to his father's greeting with immediate engagement, and Darwin had shown obvious pleasure at being addressed directly, Anais seemed to be studying Richard's face and voice with the analytical attention of someone trying to understand not just what was being said, but the motivations and character of the person saying it. Her expressions suggested that she was forming judgments and reaching conclusions based on information that remained invisible to everyone else present. The early weeks of Anais's life revealed the full extent of her extraordinary intellectual capabilities in ways that both amazed and occasionally frustrated her family. Unlike typical infants, who gradually develop awareness and responsiveness over the course of several months, Anais demonstrated sophisticated understanding of her environment almost immediately after arriving home from the hospital. She learned to anticipate feeding times with mathematical precision, becoming fussy exactly when her internal clock indicated that nutrients should be available, regardless of whether her schedule aligned with conventional infant feeding recommendations. She showed clear preferences for specific types of stimulation, responding positively to complex classical music, while becoming irritated by simpler melodies that her brothers found entertaining. Most remarkably, Anais began demonstrating problem-solving abilities that seemed to transcend normal infant cognitive development when toys or objects were placed just beyond her reach. she would systematically experiment with different movements and positions until she found a way to obtain what she wanted. When her mobile played music that did not meet her preferences, she learned to kick her legs in specific patterns that would cause it to stop or change songs. Nicole approached these early signs of exceptional intelligence with the same systematic curiosity she brought to all unusual family developments. She began keeping detailed records of Anais' behaviors and achievements, documenting milestones and capabilities that seemed to occur weeks or months ahead of normal developmental timelines. Her daughter was clearly gifted, but the extent and nature of that giftedness remained to be determined. Richard's response to Anais' obvious intellectual superiority was characteristically accepting and supportive. Rather than feeling intimidated by his daughter's advanced capabilities, he delighted in the opportunity to engage with someone whose mind worked in such interesting and complex ways. His conversations with baby Anais were more sophisticated than those he had shared with Gumball or Darwin at comparable ages, filled with vocabulary and concepts that most parents would reserve for much older children. "You know, Anais," he would say, while changing her diaper or preparing her bottle, "I think you understand a lot more about what is happening around here than most people your age. That must be frustrating sometimes, knowing things but not being able to tell anyone about them yet. But do not worry. We will figure out how to communicate better as you get bigger." Anais would respond to these observations with expressions and vocalizations that seemed to confirm Richard's assessment of her advanced understanding. Her baby talk, when it emerged, was notably more varied and purposeful than typical infant communication, suggesting that she was already experimenting with language structure and meaning in ways that most children would not attempt for many more months. The relationship between Anais and her older brothers developed along lines that reflected both their individual personalities and the significant age and developmental differences between them. Gumball, now old enough to help with basic childcare tasks, approached his baby sister with the enthusiastic affection of someone who saw her primarily as a potential playmate and adventure companion. His attempts to entertain Anais often involved elaborate performances and demonstrations that were clearly intended to amuse someone with his own interests and attention span rather than those of a typical infant. He would stage complex puppet shows featuring intricate storylines and character development, construct elaborate block towers that served as settings for detailed narrative adventures, and provide running commentary on household activities that assumed a level of comprehension far beyond normal baby capabilities. What surprised everyone was that Anais seemed genuinely engaged by these sophisticated entertainments, following Gumball's performances with obvious interest, and responding with expressions and sounds that suggested she was indeed comprehending far more of his creative presentations than anyone had expected. Her appreciation for his efforts encouraged Gumball to develop even more elaborate shows and demonstrations, creating an unusual but effective form of sibling bonding. Darwin's relationship with his new sister was characterized by the gentle protectiveness that had become his signature approach to all family relationships. Having experienced his own transformation from one form of existence to another, he seemed intuitively to understand that Anais was navigating her own complex developmental journey and needed patient support rather than pressure or expectations. He would sit beside her crib for extended periods, providing quiet commentary about household activities and family routines that might help her understand the social dynamics she was observing. His voice, naturally calm and reassuring, seemed to have a soothing effect on Anais during fussy periods, and she would often fall asleep to the sound of his gentle explanations about the world beyond her nursery. Right now, Gumball is practicing his juggling in the backyard. Darwin would report during these informal updates. He is getting much better at it, but he still drops the balls sometimes. Mom is in the kitchen making dinner, and it smells like she is trying that new recipe she found in the magazine. Dad is watching television, but he keeps falling asleep because he stayed up late last night reading to us. These conversational offerings seemed to provide Anais with the contextual information she craved about family activities and relationships, helping her develop understanding of the complex social environment she had entered. Her responses, though limited by her physical capabilities, suggested that she was absorbing and organizing this information in ways that would prove valuable as her communication skills developed. The first clear indication that Anais possessed intellectual capabilities far beyond normal infant development came when she was approximately 4 months old, and Nicole discovered her systematically solving a puzzle toy that was designed for children over 2 years of age. The toy had somehow fallen into her crib during the night, and by morning Anais had not only figured out how to manipulate its various components, but had successfully completed the puzzle multiple times, approaching it from different angles and using different strategies as if conducting experiments in problem-solving methodology. Nicole's initial reaction was to assume that the puzzle's completion had been accidental, the result of random infant movements that had coincidentally achieved the correct configuration. But when she reset the puzzle and left it within Anais's reach, her daughter repeated the performance with obvious intentionality, her small hands moving with purpose and precision that left no doubt about her deliberate engagement with the challenge. This incident prompted Nicole to begin presenting Anais with increasingly complex toys and activities, carefully observing her responses and documenting her capabilities with the thoroughness of someone conducting scientific research. What she discovered was that her 4-month-old daughter could solve puzzles, recognize patterns, and manipulate objects in ways that suggested cognitive abilities equivalent to those of much older children. Richard's response to these revelations was to begin treating Anais as the intellectual equal she clearly was, despite her physical limitations and inability to communicate verbally. He started including her in family discussions and decision-making processes, explaining household plans and asking for her input, even when that input could only be expressed through facial expressions and baby sounds. "We are thinking about going to the park this afternoon, Anais," he would say while she sat in her high chair during lunch. "Do you think that sounds like a good idea? Gumball wants to try out his new frisbee, and Darwin has been wanting to feed the ducks again. You could ride in your stroller and observe all the interesting people and animals that hang out there on weekends." Anais would respond to these consultations with obvious engagement, her expressions and vocalizations suggesting that she was indeed considering the proposed activities and forming opinions about their merits. Her participation in family planning sessions became a regular feature of household routine, with everyone learning to interpret her nonverbal communications and incorporate her preferences into their collective decisions. The development of Anais's verbal communication skills followed an accelerated timeline that reflected her advanced cognitive abilities, but also created new challenges for her family. Her first words came at 7 months, not the typical mama or dada that most babies produce, but complete sentences that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of grammar and vocabulary. "That book has incorrect information about quantum physics," she announced one morning while Nicole was reading to her from what was supposed to be an age-appropriate picture book about science. The clarity of her speech and the complexity of her observation left Nicole momentarily speechless, unsure how to respond to literary criticism from someone who had only recently learned to sit up independently. From that point forward, Anais's verbal development progressed at a pace that required constant adjustment of family communication patterns and expectations. Within weeks, she was engaging in conversations that would have challenged much older children, offering insights and asking questions that revealed both vast intelligence and the unique perspective of someone experiencing the world for the first time. Her observations about family dynamics were particularly astute and occasionally uncomfortable in their accuracy. Dad pretends not to understand things that are obvious because he thinks it makes other people feel smarter, she commented one afternoon while watching Richard struggle with what appeared to be a simple household task. But really, he just processes information differently than most people, and his approach often leads to better solutions even if it takes longer to reach them. These kinds of analytical assessments of her family members' personalities and behaviors became a regular feature of Anais' contributions to household conversations. While her insights were invariably accurate and often helpful, they also highlighted the unusual dynamics of a family where the youngest member possessed greater intellectual capabilities than everyone else combined. Nicole found herself torn between pride in her daughter's exceptional abilities and concern about the challenges that such advanced intelligence might create for a child trying to navigate normal, social, and educational environments. Anais would clearly need specialized educational opportunities that could accommodate her accelerated learning pace, but she would also need to develop the social and emotional skills that would allow her to form relationships with peers who might not share her intellectual gifts. The question of how to provide appropriate educational stimulation for Anais became increasingly pressing as her capabilities continued to expand beyond what conventional parenting resources could address. By her first birthday, she was reading independently, solving mathematical problems that challenged elementary school students, and demonstrating scientific reasoning abilities that suggested she understood complex concepts about physics, chemistry, and biology. Richard approached the challenge of parenting a genius with the same gentle acceptance he brought to all extraordinary family circumstances. Rather than trying to normalize Anais' abilities or push her to develop in conventional ways, he focused on creating an environment where she could explore her interests and develop her capabilities at her own pace while still experiencing the love and security that all children need, regardless of their intellectual gifts. "You know, Anais," he said one evening while helping her conduct experiments with household chemicals that she had requested for her birthday. "Being really smart is a wonderful thing, but it can also be lonely sometimes. People might not always understand the things you are interested in, or they might feel intimidated by how much you know. But that does not mean there is anything wrong with you, or that you should try to hide how smart you are." Anais listened to this advice with the serious attention she gave to all meaningful communications, nodding in ways that suggested she was already beginning to understand the social complexities that would accompany her intellectual gifts. "I know, Dad," she replied, "but I also know that I have a family who loves me exactly as I am, which means I can be myself here, even if I have to be more careful about that in other places." The balance between nurturing Anais' exceptional abilities and ensuring that she experienced a normal, happy childhood became one of the defining challenges of the Watterson family's evolution. They needed to provide intellectual stimulation that would keep her engaged and growing, while also protecting her from the isolation and pressure that often accompany early giftedness. The solution they developed was characteristically creative and collaborative, involving all family members in creating an environment where intelligence was celebrated but not prioritized over kindness. Curiosity was encouraged but balanced with empathy, and individual achievements were valued within the context of family loyalty and mutual support. Anais' role as the family's intellectual advisor emerged naturally from her obvious capabilities and her genuine desire to use her gifts in service of the people she loved. She began helping Gumball with school projects, not by doing the work for him, but by teaching him research methods and analytical thinking skills that improved his own performance. She assisted Darwin with understanding complex social situations, offering insights into human behavior that helped him navigate relationships with greater confidence. Most importantly, She became Richard and Nicole's consultant on matters requiring strategic thinking or problem-solving capabilities that exceeded their own intellectual resources. Her ability to analyze situations objectively and identify optimal solutions made her an invaluable resource for family decisions, ranging from financial planning to interpersonal conflicts. Yet despite her advanced capabilities and important role in family dynamics, Anais remained fundamentally a child who needed the same love, attention, and emotional security that all children require for healthy development. The Watterson family's greatest achievement was creating an environment where her exceptional intelligence was valued and utilized without overshadowing her need for play, affection, and the kind of unconditional acceptance that allows children to develop confidence and emotional resilience. The completion of the Watterson family with Anais's arrival created a household dynamic that was both more complex and more harmonious than anyone could have anticipated. Each family member brought unique strengths and perspectives that complemented and enhanced the contributions of the others, creating a whole that was far greater than the sum of its individual parts. Nicole's practical leadership and organizational skills provided the foundation that allowed everyone else's talents to flourish. Richard's gentle wisdom and emotional intelligence created the atmosphere of acceptance and love that made their unusual family configuration not just functional but joyful. Gumball's creativity and energy generated the adventures and experiences that kept family life exciting and meaningful. Darwin's moral compass and empathetic nature provided the ethical framework that guided their decisions and relationships. And Anais's intellectual capabilities offered the analytical tools and strategic thinking that helped them navigate complex challenges and opportunities. Together, they had created something unprecedented and beautiful. A family where differences were celebrated rather than merely tolerated, where each member's unique gifts were recognized as essential contributions to their collective success and happiness. The house at 43 Elmore Street had become a sanctuary, where impossible things happened regularly, not because of magic or coincidence, but because they were surrounded by the kind of unconditional love that made any transformation or achievement possible. As Anais grew from infant to toddler to young child, her integration into this extraordinary family dynamic became complete and natural. She was not the smart one, or the baby, or the youngest member, but simply Anais' beloved daughter and sister whose intelligence was just one of many gifts she brought to a household where everyone's contributions were valued and everyone's happiness was considered equally important. The Watterson family had achieved something rare and precious in their creation of a home where love transcended all conventional boundaries and expectations, where each member could be completely themselves while remaining fully connected to the whole, where the chaos of daily life was transformed into something resembling a daily celebration of the beautiful complexity that comes from choosing to build a life based on acceptance, creativity, and the endless possibilities that emerge when people dare to love each other exactly as they are. The transformation that occurred in Nicole Watterson each weekday morning at precisely 6:45 was so complete and dramatic that witnesses might have been forgiven for thinking they were observing some form of supernatural metamorphosis rather than simply a working mother preparing for another day at the office. The gentle, nurturing woman who had spent the evening reading bedtime stories and tucking her children into their beds with whispered words of love would systematically dismantle her maternal persona and reconstruct herself as a corporate warrior, capable of surviving the brutal efficiency demands of the Rainbow Factory. The alarm clock's shrill announcement of dawn was Nicole's call to battle, though she rarely needed its mechanical assistance to wake her from sleep that had become increasingly light. and fragmented as the responsibilities of supporting a family of 5 pressed more heavily upon her shoulders. She had developed the ability to function on 4 or 5 hours of rest per night, a skill born from necessity rather than choice, her body adapting to the relentless schedule that modern working motherhood demanded. Her morning routine was a carefully choreographed sequence of activities designed to maximize efficiency while minimizing the time spent away from her family's needs. She moved through the house in near silence, her footsteps calculated to avoid the creaky floorboards that might wake Richard or the children. Her movements precise and economical as she gathered the clothes, documents, and personal items that would armor her for the day ahead. The shower was both practical necessity and symbolic ritual, the hot water washing away the softness and vulnerability that characterized her home persona, while preparing her skin and fur for the professional polish that would make her indistinguishable from the other ambitious executives who populated the corporate landscape of Elmore's business district. She emerged from the bathroom each morning as if stepping out of a chrysalis, her transformation from mother to professional as complete as Darwin's evolution from fish to family member had been, though far more temporary and reversible. The application of makeup required the steady hands of someone performing delicate surgery, each stroke of mascara and touch of lipstick carefully calculated to project competence, authority, and the kind of controlled aggression that corporate environments rewarded. The face that looked back at her from the bathroom mirror bore only passing resemblance to the one that had smiled tenderly at her children the night before, its features sharpened and defined in ways that suggested someone prepared for conflict rather than comfort. Her professional wardrobe hung in the closet like suits of armor awaiting their warrior, each outfit selected for its ability to command respect and project success, rather than for comfort or personal preference. The sharp lines of her business suits, the precision of her accessories, the subtle authority conveyed by her choice of shoes and briefcase, every element was chosen to communicate that she was someone who belonged in boardrooms and strategy meetings, whose opinions carried weight, and whose decisions affected important outcomes. The journey from bedroom to kitchen required her to navigate the sleeping household with the stealth of someone crossing enemy territory. Though her family represented the most precious cargo rather than any kind of threat, she paused at each doorway to observe her children in sleep, her professional facade softening momentarily as maternal love overrode corporate conditioning. Gumball sprawled across his bed with the abandonment of someone whose dreams were filled with adventure and possibility. Darwin curled peacefully under blankets that suggested security and contentment. Anne slept with the orderly precision that characterized all her activities, even her unconscious ones organized according to some internal system of efficiency and purpose. Richard's sleeping form represented both comfort and concern for Nicole, as she prepared for another day of carrying the family's financial responsibilities alone. His gentle breathing and peaceful expression reminded her of all the reasons she had fallen in love with him, while simultaneously highlighting the economic pressures that made her transformation into a corporate professional absolutely necessary for their survival and prosperity. The kitchen became Nicole's final staging area for the day's campaign, where she prepared breakfast with military precision, while simultaneously reviewing important documents, checking her phone for urgent messages, and mentally rehearsing the presentations and meetings that would determine whether she could continue providing the financial stability her family required. Her movements were economical and purposeful, every action serving multiple functions, as she maximized the productivity of each precious minute. The breakfast she prepared for her family was an expression of love translated into practical nutrition, each meal carefully planned to provide the energy and nourishment that would sustain them through their own daily challenges and adventures. She left detailed notes for Richard about lunch preparations and after-school activities, her handwriting conveying both authority and affection as she coordinated the household's complex logistics from her position as primary breadwinner and strategic planner. The commute to the Rainbow Factory served as a transitional period during which the last vestiges of Nicole's maternal identity were systematically suppressed in favor of the professional persona that would guide her through the corporate battlefield ahead. She used the driving time to review sales figures and marketing strategies, to prepare responses to anticipated challenges and objections, to steel herself for another day of proving that she deserved her position in an environment that rarely offered second chances or easy victories. The Rainbow Factory itself stood as a monument to industrial efficiency and corporate ambition, its gleaming exterior surfaces reflecting the morning sunlight in ways that suggested both prosperity and the kind of relentless productivity that modern businesses demanded from their employees. The building's architecture spoke of success and permanence, though Nicole knew from experience that corporate success was always temporary, and that permanence was an illusion that could be shattered by quarterly reports and market fluctuations. Her office occupied a middle tier in the building's hierarchy, positioned high enough to command respect from junior employees, while remaining sufficiently distant from the executive floors to remind her that further advancement would require continued excellence and strategic maneuvering. The space was decorated with the kind of professional neutrality that suggested competence without revealing personality, its clean lines and organized efficiency reflecting her ability to manage complex responsibilities while maintaining the focus necessary for strategic decision-making. The work itself demanded every ounce of intelligence, creativity, and determination that Nicole possessed, requiring her to navigate corporate politics while delivering results that would satisfy supervisors whose own positions depended on the success of their subordinates. She developed marketing campaigns that would increase consumer demand for rainbow-related products, analyzed market data to identify emerging trends and opportunities, and participated in strategic planning sessions that would determine the company's direction for months or years to come. Her colleagues recognized her as someone whose opinions carried weight and whose contributions consistently exceeded expectations, though few understood the personal cost of maintaining such high-performance standards while simultaneously managing a household that included 3 extraordinary children and a husband whose gentle nature made him unsuited for the competitive pressures of modern employment. Nicole's professional success was built on her ability to compartmentalize her various responsibilities, keeping family concerns separate from work obligations while ensuring that neither suffered from divided attention. The phone calls from school that occasionally interrupted her workday served as unwelcome reminders that her 2 worlds were not as separate as she tried to maintain them. Gumball's creative interpretations of classroom assignments sometimes resulted in disruptions that required parental intervention, while Darwin's unique perspective on social situations occasionally created misunderstandings that needed maternal guidance to resolve. These interruptions filled Nicole with conflicting emotions, frustration at having her professional focus broken, concern for her children's well-being, and guilt about being physically absent during moments when they needed her support and guidance. The lunch hours she sometimes spent in her car rather than the employee cafeteria provided brief opportunities to reconnect with her maternal identity through phone calls, home, or quick errands that served family needs rather than professional obligations. These stolen moments of domesticity were both refreshing and painful, reminders of the life she was temporarily abandoning each day in service of financial necessity and long-term family security. The afternoon energy crash that struck her around 3 o'clock each day was a physical manifestation of the toll that constant high-performance work was taking on her body and spirit. She had learned to push through these periods of exhaustion through sheer force of will, aided by carefully timed caffeine consumption and the knowledge that family responsibilities would demand her full attention from the moment she walked through her front door until the children were safely asleep in their beds. The commute home served as decompression time, during which Nicole began the reverse transformation that would restore her maternal identity for the evening hours ahead. She used the driving time to review the day's family-related communications, to plan dinner preparations and homework supervision, and to mentally shift from corporate strategist to nurturing caregiver. The transition was never complete or entirely successful, leaving her feeling fragmented and exhausted as she attempted to meet the emotional needs of her family while her mind remained partially occupied with unfinished business matters and tomorrow's challenges. The moment she walked through the front door of 43 Elmore Street, Nicole was expected to instantly resume her role as the family's emotional center and practical coordinator, despite having spent 8 or 9 hours in an environment that demanded completely different skills and personality traits. Her children needed help with homework, attention for their daily adventures and concerns, and the kind of patient, loving guidance that would help them develop into confident, capable individuals. Richard needed her partnership in household management and her emotional support as he navigated his own daily challenges and insecurities. The dinner preparations became a form of meditation that helped Nicole reconnect with her domestic identity, while simultaneously demonstrating her love for her family through the practical act of providing nourishment. She planned meals that would satisfy everyone's preferences while meeting their nutritional needs, often accommodating Anais's sophisticated palate alongside Gumball's more conventional tastes and Darwin's unique dietary requirements as a former fish who had developed terrestrial eating habits. The kitchen conversations that took place during meal preparation served as daily debriefings that allowed each family member to share their experiences and challenges, while Nicole gradually shed the protective armor of her professional persona and returned to her authentic role as wife and mother. These discussions were often chaotic and overlapping, with multiple voices competing for attention and various crises requiring immediate maternal intervention. But they represented the emotional heart of family life in ways that made Nicole's daily sacrifices feel meaningful and worthwhile. The homework supervision that followed dinner tested Nicole's ability to switch between different types of problem-solving and communication skills, as she helped each child navigate their unique educational challenges. Gumball's creative assignments required her to channel his imagination while ensuring that his work met academic requirements. Darwin's social studies projects needed her guidance in understanding human cultural concepts that remained foreign to his unique perspective. Anais's advanced coursework often exceeded Nicole's own educational background, forcing her to research topics and learn alongside her brilliant daughter. The bedtime routines that concluded each evening were perhaps the most precious and exhausting part of Nicole's day, requiring her to provide individualized attention to each child while her own energy reserves had been depleted by 10 or 12 hours of non-stop responsibility and decision-making. Reading stories to Gumball, discussing philosophical questions with Darwin, and engaging with Anais's complex observations about the world demanded creativity, patience, and emotional availability that she sometimes struggled to summon after particularly demanding workdays. The conversations with Richard that took place after the children were asleep provided both comfort and additional challenges for Nicole as she attempted to maintain her role as partner and emotional support while processing her own stress and exhaustion from another day of juggling multiple, demanding responsibilities. Richard's gentle nature and intuitive understanding of her struggles made him an invaluable source of emotional sustenance, but his limited ability to contribute financially to the family's needs meant that Nicole bore the primary burden of ensuring their economic security and future prosperity. The planning sessions that often extended late into the evening involved Nicole in coordinating family schedules, managing household finances, and making strategic decisions about everything from educational opportunities for the children to long-term career advancement that would improve their quality of life. These responsibilities required the same analytical and organizational skills she used at work, but applied to much more personal and emotionally significant challenges than corporate marketing campaigns or quarterly sales targets. The brief moments of solitude that Nicole sometimes found between her family's bedtime and her own provided opportunities for reflection on the choices and sacrifices that defined her daily existence. She had chosen to prioritize financial security and professional achievement over personal comfort and emotional ease, understanding that her family's unusual configuration required economic stability that could only be achieved through her corporate success. The cost of this choice was measured not just in physical exhaustion, but in the constant tension between her authentic identity as nurturing caregiver and the aggressive professional persona that her work environment demanded. The pride she took in her family's prosperity and security was balanced by guilt about the time and energy that her career necessarily diverted from direct interaction with her children during their formative years. She missed school plays and parent conferences, relied on Richard for daily childcare responsibilities that she would have preferred to handle personally, and sometimes felt like a visitor in her own home rather than its emotional center and primary caregiver. The financial statements and bank account balances that she reviewed during these quiet evening hours provided concrete evidence that her sacrifices were producing the intended results. The family owned their home, maintained adequate savings for emergencies and opportunities, and could afford educational and recreational activities that enriched their children's development and happiness. These achievements represented the successful transformation of her daily struggles into tangible benefits for the people she loved most, justifying the personal costs she paid to maintain their standard of living. The letters and emails from work that sometimes intruded into her family time served as unwelcome reminders that her professional responsibilities never completely ended, that corporate success required constant vigilance and availability that left little space for complete relaxation or total focus on domestic concerns. She had learned to manage these intrusions through careful time management and boundary setting, but the pressure to remain professionally accessible, even during family hours, created ongoing stress that affected her ability to be fully present for the people who needed her attention and care. The deep satisfaction that Nicole derived from her dual role as corporate professional and family matriarch was complicated by the recognition that neither identity could be fully realized while she was attempting to excel at both. Simultaneously, her professional achievements were limited by the time and emotional energy she devoted to family responsibilities, while her maternal aspirations were constrained by the hours she necessarily spent away from home, earning the income that made their lifestyle possible. Yet the alternative, choosing one role over the other, remained unthinkable for someone whose identity had been shaped by the belief that love expressed itself through practical action and personal sacrifice. Nicole's daily transformation from mother to executive and back again was not just a professional necessity, but a form of love made visible, a concrete demonstration of her commitment to providing her family with both emotional security and financial stability, regardless of the personal cost involved. The extraordinary nature of her family, with Darwin's unique origins, Aeneas's exceptional intelligence, and Gumball's creative energy, required resources and opportunities that could only be secured through economic success that was entirely dependent on her professional achievements. This responsibility was both a burden and a source of profound meaning, connecting her individual ambitions to her family's collective prosperity in ways that transformed every workday challenge into an act of devotion and every professional victory into a gift for the people she loved beyond measure. The house at 43 Elmore Street stood as a testament to Nicole's success in balancing these competing demands, its comfortable furnishings and modern conveniences representing the practical benefits of her corporate achievements, while its atmosphere of love and acceptance reflected her continuing commitment to nurturing the extraordinary individuals who called it home. The daily miracle of her transformation, from executive to mother and back again, created the foundation that allowed everyone else's unique gifts to flourish, proving that the greatest acts of love are often the most difficult ones, performed daily without recognition or praise by people who understand that their sacrifices make other people's happiness possible. The profound misunderstanding that surrounded Richard Watterson's place in his family and his approach to existence stemmed largely from the tendency of outside observers to mistake gentleness for weakness, contentment for laziness, and emotional intelligence for intellectual deficiency. To those who encountered him only briefly or superficially, Richard appeared to be a man who had somehow failed to develop the competitive instincts and aggressive ambitions that modern society demanded of its male members, someone who had chosen the path of least resistance, rather than engaging with the complex challenges of adult responsibility. This assessment could not have been further from the truth, though Richard himself rarely felt compelled to correct such misconceptions or defend his choices to people whose opinions held little weight in the carefully constructed world of love and acceptance that he had helped create at 43 Elmore Street. His apparent obliviousness to criticism and judgment was not evidence of intellectual limitation, but rather the natural result of a value system that prioritized internal peace and family harmony over external validation and social approval. The morning routine that began Richard's day was a study in unhurried intentionality, each activity undertaken with the kind of mindful attention that meditation teachers spend years trying to cultivate in their students. While Nicole transformed herself into a corporate warrior through systematic efficiency and strategic preparation, Richard awakened each day as if discovering the world anew, approaching even the most mundane tasks with genuine curiosity and appreciation for their inherent beauty and complexity. His first conscious moments were typically spent in quiet observation of whatever details happened to capture his attention, the way sunlight filtered through the bedroom curtains, the rhythm of Nicole's breathing as she continued sleeping beside him, the distant sounds of birds beginning their dawn chorus in the oak tree outside their window. These periods of gentle awareness served as informal meditation sessions that established his emotional equilibrium for the challenges and joys that each new day would bring. The preparation of breakfast for his family was not simply a matter of providing necessary nutrition, but an expression of love translated into practical care and attention. Richard approached cooking with the same patient creativity he brought to all domestic activities, viewing each meal as an opportunity to demonstrate his devotion to his children's happiness and well-being through the simple act of nourishing their bodies and souls simultaneously. His pancakes were not just circles of batter transformed by heat into edible sustenance, but carefully crafted expressions of paternal affection, each one shaped according to the individual preferences and personalities of the family members who would consume them. Gumball's pancakes often featured elaborate designs that reflected his current interests and obsessions: dinosaur shapes during his paleontology phase, rocket ships when space exploration captured his imagination, elaborate architectural structures when he became fascinated with building and construction. Darwin's breakfast preferences reflected his unique perspective as someone who had experienced existence from both aquatic and terrestrial viewpoints, leading to creative combinations of ingredients that might have seemed unusual to conventional palates, but perfectly suited his evolved sensibilities. Richard took genuine pleasure in discovering new ways to honor Darwin's dietary requirements while ensuring that his meals provided both nutritional value and sensory satisfaction. Anais' sophisticated tastes challenged Richard to expand his culinary creativity in directions that reflected her advanced intellectual development while remaining appropriate for her chronological age and physical needs. Her breakfast requests often involved complex flavor combinations and presentation styles that required research and experimentation, transforming morning meal preparation into collaborative learning experiences that enriched both father and daughter's understanding of nutrition, chemistry, and cultural cuisine. The conversations that accompanied these breakfast preparations revealed the depth of Richard's engagement with his children's inner lives and developmental needs. Unlike many parents who used morning routines as opportunities to deliver instructions and reminders about daily obligations, Richard treated these interactions as chances to connect with each child's unique perspective on the world and their place within it. His questions were not perfunctory inquiries about homework completion or scheduled activities, but genuine expressions of interest in their thoughts, feelings, and observations about the experiences that filled their days. He asked Gumball about his dreams, not just the nocturnal adventures that occurred during sleep, but the aspirations and ambitions that motivated his creative projects and social interactions. He encouraged Darwin to share his insights about human behavior and social dynamics, recognizing that his son's unusual origins provided valuable perspectives on interpersonal relationships and cultural phenomena. His discussions with Anais operated on intellectual levels that might have intimidated less confident parents, but Richard approached her advanced capabilities with the same natural acceptance he brought to all family characteristics. He engaged with her complex questions about science, philosophy, and social organization, not by pretending to possess knowledge he lacked, but by joining her in the exploration of ideas and encouraging her natural curiosity, while providing the emotional support that even genius children require from their parents. The school preparation routines that followed breakfast demonstrated Richard's understanding of each child's individual needs and his commitment to ensuring that they began each day with the confidence and emotional security that would help them navigate whatever challenges their educational and social environments might present. His approach to this responsibility was characteristically gentle but thoroughly comprehensive, addressing both practical necessities and psychological readiness with equal attention and care. Gumball's tendency toward creative chaos required Richard's patient guidance in organizing school supplies, completing forgotten assignments, and mentally preparing for classroom expectations that sometimes conflicted with his natural inclinations toward spontaneity and artistic expression. Richard never criticized his son's organizational challenges or demanded that he conform to conventional standards of academic behavior, but instead helped him develop strategies for meeting external requirements while maintaining his authentic creative identity. Darwin's social anxieties and occasional confusion about human cultural norms needed Richard's gentle coaching and reassurance, helping him understand that his unique perspective was a strength rather than a limitation, and that most social difficulties could be resolved through honest communication and genuine kindness. Richard shared his own experiences with feeling different from others, offering wisdom gained through years of navigating a world that often failed to appreciate gentleness and emotional sensitivity. Anais' intellectual superiority sometimes created social challenges that required Richard's guidance in balancing academic excellence with age-appropriate social development. He helped her understand that her advanced capabilities carried responsibilities to use her gifts in ways that helped others rather than intimidating or alienating them, while ensuring that she never felt obligated to diminish her abilities to accommodate other people's insecurities. The household management that occupied Richard's days while his family pursued their various educational and professional obligations was approached with the same mindful attention he brought to all activities, transforming routine domestic tasks into opportunities for creative expression and personal growth. Cleaning became meditation, organizing evolved into artistic arrangement, and maintenance projects developed into learning experiences that expanded his understanding of how things worked and why they sometimes required repair or replacement. His approach to housework was notably different from Nicole's systematic efficiency or Anais' methodical precision, operating instead on principles of intuitive flow and aesthetic appreciation that resulted in spaces that felt lived in and loved rather than merely clean and organized. Richard understood that homes were meant to serve their inhabitants' emotional and spiritual needs, not simply meet standards of conventional tidiness and order. The laundry that he folded with such apparent incompetence that it frequently entertained his family was actually approached with careful attention to the symbolic significance of caring for the clothing that protected and expressed his loved ones' identities. Each garment was handled with respect and affection, treated not as mere textile to be processed, but as part of the personal history and daily experience of someone whose comfort and happiness mattered deeply to him. His garden work reflected the same philosophy of gentle cultivation that characterized his approach to parenting and relationship management, understanding that growth could not be forced but only encouraged through the provision of proper conditions and patient attention. The flowers and vegetables that flourished under his care did so because he observed their individual needs and responded with appropriate support, much as he did with his children's educational and emotional development. The neighborhood interactions that occurred during Richard's daily walks and errands revealed the extent to which his gentle nature and genuine interest in others' well-being had made him a beloved figure throughout their section of Elmore. Children who encountered him on their way to school knew they could count on his patient attention to their concerns and enthusiasms, while elderly residents appreciated his willingness to help with physical tasks and his genuine interest in their stories and perspectives. These relationships were not cultivated for any strategic purpose or social advancement, but arose naturally from Richard's authentic care for the community that surrounded his family and his instinctive understanding that individual happiness was connected to collective well-being. His reputation as someone who could be counted on for assistance, emotional support, and non-judgmental listening made him an informal counselor and problem solver for people facing various personal and practical challenges. The creative projects that Richard pursued during quiet afternoon hours, when household tasks were completed and family members were engaged in their various activities, revealed depths of artistic sensitivity and imagination that contradicted assumptions about his intellectual capabilities. His drawings, stories, and musical compositions were not technically sophisticated in conventional terms, but they possessed emotional authenticity and creative vision that reflected his unique perspective on beauty, meaning, and human experience. These artistic endeavors were rarely shared beyond his immediate family, not because Richard was ashamed of them, but because he created primarily for the joy of creation itself, rather than for recognition or approval from others. His art served as both personal expression and spiritual practice, allowing him to process his observations and emotions while contributing to the household's atmosphere of creativity and wonder. The afternoon naps that Richard sometimes indulged in were not evidence of laziness or lack of ambition, but necessary restoration periods that allowed him to maintain the emotional availability and physical energy that his family required from him during the more demanding evening hours when everyone returned home with their various needs for attention, support, and guidance. His ability to rest when rest was needed reflected wisdom about sustainable living rather than character weakness. The dinner preparations that Richard often began before Nicole arrived home from work were expressions of partnership and mutual support that acknowledged her daily sacrifices while ensuring that family time could begin immediately upon her return rather than being delayed by domestic logistics. His cooking during these hours was more elaborate and ambitious than breakfast preparations, reflecting his understanding that evening meals served social and emotional functions beyond simple nutrition. The patience with which Richard approached his children's homework supervision and extracurricular support revealed his deep commitment to their individual development and his intuitive understanding of how learning occurred most effectively. He never pushed them to excel according to external standards that might conflict with their authentic interests and capabilities, but instead helped them discover their own motivations and develop their own strategies for achieving goals that truly mattered to them. His assistance with Gumball's creative projects involved gentle guidance that enhanced rather than controlling his son's artistic vision, helping him develop technical skills while preserving the spontaneity and originality that made his work distinctive. Richard's contributions to Darwin's social learning provided emotional context and strategic insight that helped him navigate interpersonal challenges with greater confidence and success. The intellectual discussions that Richard maintained with Anais demonstrated his ability to engage with complex ideas even when they exceeded his formal educational background, contributing emotional wisdom and life experience that complemented her analytical capabilities and theoretical knowledge. Their conversations served as bridges between abstract understanding and practical application, helping Anais develop empathy and social awareness alongside her academic achievements. The bedtime routines that Richard shared with each child provided opportunities for individual connection and emotional processing that helped them integrate their daily experiences while feeling secure and loved as they prepared for sleep. His storytelling abilities transformed simple narratives into elaborate adventures that captured their imaginations while conveying subtle lessons about values, relationships, and approaches to challenges. The conversations with Nicole that concluded each day provided Richard with opportunities to offer emotional support and practical assistance while receiving the intellectual stimulation and adult companionship that balanced his focus on childcare and domestic responsibilities. These discussions revealed his sophisticated understanding of family dynamics and his strategic thinking about long-term goals and decisions, contradicting assumptions about his intellectual limitations. The financial management that Richard handled through careful attention to household budgets and spending priorities demonstrated his practical competence and his commitment to ensuring that Nicole's hard-earned income was used wisely and effectively. His approach to money was guided by values of sufficiency and gratitude rather than ambition for accumulation. But his management was responsible and thoughtful rather than careless or naive. The crisis management that Richard provided during family emergencies and unexpected challenges revealed capabilities that remained hidden during normal circumstances, but emerged when they were most needed. His calm presence and intuitive problem-solving abilities helped his family navigate difficulties with resilience and unity, demonstrating that his apparent simplicity concealed depths of strength and wisdom that could be accessed when circumstances required them. The community involvement that Richard maintained through volunteer activities and informal assistance to neighbors reflected his understanding that individual happiness was connected to collective well-being and that his family's prosperity carried responsibilities to contribute to the broader social good. His service was quiet and unrecognized, motivated by genuine care rather than desire for acknowledgement or social status. The personal growth that Richard pursued through reading, observation, and reflection demonstrated his commitment to continuous learning and development despite his lack of formal educational credentials or professional advancement opportunities. His intellectual curiosity operated in dimensions that were different from conventional academic or corporate achievement, but no less meaningful or valuable in terms of human development and wisdom acquisition. The legacy that Richard was creating through his influence on his children's development and his contribution to his family's emotional health represented achievements that would have lasting significance long after more visible and celebrated accomplishments had been forgotten. His patient love, consistent support, and gentle guidance were shaping three extraordinary individuals who would carry his values and wisdom into their own relationships and contributions to the world. The house at 43 Elmore Street stood as a testament to Richard's success in creating an environment where love could flourish without conditions or limitations, where each family member could develop their authentic identity while remaining securely connected to the whole, where differences were celebrated rather than merely tolerated. This achievement, invisible to outside observers but fundamental to his family's happiness and success, represented the kind of quiet heroism that made ordinary miracles possible every day. The individual journeys that each of the Watterson children undertook as they grew from infancy through their formative years revealed the complex interplay between inherited characteristics and environmental influences that shapes all human development. Though in their case, these ordinary processes were complicated by extraordinary circumstances that challenged conventional understanding of childhood growth and family dynamics. Each child's path toward maturity was marked by unique challenges and discoveries that reflected both their individual personalities and their shared experience of growing up in a household where the impossible had become routine and love had transcended every traditional boundary. Gumball's evolution from a self-centered toddler into a young person capable of genuine empathy and consideration for others was perhaps the most dramatic transformation among the three siblings, requiring him to overcome natural tendencies toward impulsiveness and egocentricity that had initially made him the undisputed center of attention in their household. His early years had been characterized by the kind of confident assumption that the world existed primarily for his entertainment and benefit, an attitude that was both charming in its innocence and exhausting in its relentless demands on everyone around him. The first major challenge to Gumball's self-focused worldview came with Darwin's transformation from pet to brother, an event that required him to adjust his understanding of relationships and hierarchy in ways that his young mind initially found difficult to process. The goldfish who had been his possession and audience suddenly became his equal and companion, someone whose needs and desires deserved consideration and whose happiness mattered as much as his own. This transition was not accomplished smoothly or without resistance. Gumball's initial response to Darwin's newfound ability to walk, talk, and express independent opinions was a mixture of excitement and possessiveness that sometimes led to conflicts requiring parental intervention and guidance. He struggled to understand why his former pet was now expected to have input into their shared activities and decisions, why Darwin's preferences sometimes took precedence over his own wishes, and why the unconditional devotion he had received as Darwin's owner had been replaced by the more complex dynamics of brotherhood and friendship. The arrival of Anais added another layer of complexity to Gumball's understanding of his place within the family structure, forcing him to confront the reality that he was no longer the youngest child and that his intellectual superiority within the household had been permanently challenged by someone whose capabilities exceeded his own in virtually every measurable category. The adjustment to having a baby sister who was demonstrably smarter than he was required Gumball to develop new forms of self-worth and identity that were not dependent on being the most clever or capable member of his generation. Richard's gentle guidance during these difficult transitions proved instrumental in helping Gumball develop the emotional maturity necessary to navigate these changing relationships without losing his essential sense of self-worth and confidence. Rather than dismissing his son's struggles or demanding that he simply accept these new circumstances without complaint, Richard acknowledged the genuine difficulty of sharing attention and authority, while consistently reinforcing the message that love was not a finite resource that became diluted when distributed among multiple recipients. The creative projects that became Gumball's primary outlet for self-expression revealed both his artistic talents and his gradual development of the ability to consider perspectives other than his own. His early stories and drawings had featured himself as the undisputed hero of every adventure, with other characters serving primarily as audience or obstacles to be overcome. As he matured, his narratives became more complex and collaborative, incorporating the viewpoints and contributions of his siblings in ways that suggested genuine appreciation for their unique strengths and perspectives. The school experiences that introduced Gumball to social relationships beyond his family circle provided crucial opportunities for him to practice the empathy and cooperation skills he was developing at home while facing the additional challenges of navigating peer relationships and academic expectations. His natural charisma and creative energy made him popular among his classmates, but his tendency toward dramatic gestures and attention-seeking behavior sometimes created conflicts that required him to learn new strategies for social success. The friendship he developed with Penny Fitzgerald represented a particularly significant milestone in his emotional development, requiring him to consider another person's feelings and needs in ways that went beyond the family obligations he had gradually learned to accept. His romantic interest in Penny motivated him to develop qualities of consideration and selflessness that might have taken much longer to emerge through family relationships alone, while her positive response to his efforts reinforced the value of putting others' happiness ahead of his own immediate gratification. The academic challenges that Gumball faced at school revealed both his intellectual capabilities and his need for educational approaches that accommodated his creative learning style and high energy levels. Traditional classroom environments sometimes struggled to contain his enthusiasm and unconventional approaches to problem solving, leading to conflicts with teachers who interpreted his creativity as disruptive behavior rather than alternative intelligence. Nicole and Richard's advocacy for their son's educational needs demonstrated their understanding that Gumball's success required environments that could channel his energy and imagination in positive directions rather than simply demanding conformity to conventional expectations. They worked with school administrators to develop strategies that allowed him to meet academic requirements while maintaining his authentic creative identity, recognizing that his future happiness and success depended on learning to work within social systems without sacrificing his essential nature. Darwin's journey from pet to person to moral guide represented a unique form of human development that had no precedent in conventional child psychology or family studies, requiring him to navigate questions of identity and purpose that challenged fundamental assumptions about consciousness, relationships, and social responsibility. His transformation had given him physical capabilities and intellectual awareness that allowed him to participate fully in human society. But his origins as a goldfish continued to influence his perspective on existence in ways that provided both advantages and challenges. The innocence that characterized Darwin's approach to human relationships and social conventions was both his greatest strength and his most significant vulnerability, allowing him to form connections with others based on genuine affection and trust, while sometimes leaving him unprepared for the complexity and occasional cruelty that marked many human interactions. His natural assumption that all people shared his commitment to kindness and honesty made him an ideal friend and companion, but sometimes resulted in disappointment and confusion when others failed to meet his expectations. The moral clarity that became Darwin's defining characteristic emerged from his unique position as someone who had experienced existence from fundamentally different perspectives, giving him insights into the nature of life and consciousness that informed his approach to ethical decision-making. His understanding of what it meant to be alive, conscious, and connected to others was grounded in direct experience of transformation and growth, rather than abstract philosophical concepts, lending his moral judgments a weight and authenticity that others found compelling. The role he developed as Gumball's conscience and advisor reflected both his genuine care for his brother's well-being and his natural inclination toward peaceful resolution of conflicts and challenges. Darwin's gentle guidance helped Gumball navigate moral dilemmas and social challenges with greater wisdom and consideration than he might have managed independently, while their collaborative approach to problem-solving typically produced solutions that satisfied everyone involved, rather than creating winners and losers. The educational experiences that Darwin encountered at school required him to develop new forms of communication and social interaction while managing the ongoing challenges of being fundamentally different from his classmates in ways that were not immediately visible, but nonetheless significant. His teachers and peers generally accepted his presence without question, but his unique perspective on learning and relationships sometimes created misunderstandings that required patient explanation and adjustment. The friendships that Darwin formed with classmates outside his family circle provided important opportunities for him to practice social skills while contributing his distinctive insights and perspectives to group activities and collaborative projects. His natural empathy and genuine interest in others' well-being made him a popular and trusted friend, while his tendency to see the best in everyone helped him navigate social conflicts with grace and effectiveness. The philosophical questions that Darwin posed about existence, consciousness, and moral responsibility reflected his ongoing process of understanding what it meant to be alive and aware in ways that most people took for granted. His inquiries into the nature of identity, the source of moral obligations, and the meaning of personal growth provided his family with opportunities for deep discussions that enriched everyone's understanding of these fundamental issues. Aeneas's development from infant prodigy to young genius required her to navigate the complex challenges of exceptional intellectual ability while maintaining the emotional connections and social skills necessary for healthy relationships and personal happiness. Her extraordinary intelligence was both a tremendous gift that opened up unlimited possibilities for learning and achievement, and a potential barrier that could isolate her from peers and create unrealistic expectations about her capabilities and responsibilities. The burden of being consistently smarter than everyone around her, including most adults, required Aeneas to develop emotional maturity and social wisdom that complemented her analytical capabilities while protecting her from the isolation and arrogance that sometimes accompanied exceptional intelligence. Her parents' approach to nurturing her gifts, while ensuring her emotional health, involved careful balance between providing appropriate intellectual challenges and maintaining realistic expectations about her social and emotional development. The protective instincts that Aeneas developed toward her family members reflected both her genuine love for them and her recognition that her intellectual advantages created responsibilities to use her capabilities in service of their collective well-being. Rather than using her superior knowledge and analytical skills to dominate family discussions or manipulate situations to her advantage, she learned to apply her intelligence in ways that solved problems and improved outcomes for everyone involved. The educational challenges that Anais faced required careful coordination between her parents and school administrators to ensure that her academic needs were met without creating social problems or unrealistic pressure for continuous, exceptional performance. Her ability to master advanced concepts quickly and thoroughly sometimes made traditional classroom environments boring or frustrating, while her age-inappropriate knowledge occasionally created awkward situations with teachers and classmates. The friendships that Anais formed, despite her intellectual superiority, demonstrated her growing understanding that relationships were based on emotional connection and mutual respect, rather than intellectual compatibility or academic achievement. Her ability to relate to peers who did not share her mental capabilities required her to develop empathy and communication skills that allowed her to appreciate different forms of intelligence and wisdom. The creative projects that Anais pursued outside her formal academic work revealed aspects of her personality and interests that went beyond pure intellectual achievement, showing her capacity for artistic expression, emotional depth, and imaginative thinking that complemented her analytical abilities. These activities provided outlets for aspects of her nature that might otherwise have been overshadowed by her reputation as a genius, helping her maintain a balanced sense of identity and purpose. The family dynamics that emerged as all three children matured into their individual identities, while maintaining their close emotional bonds, represented the successful achievement of Nicole and Richard's parenting goals, creating an environment where differences were celebrated rather than merely tolerated, and where individual growth enhanced rather than threatened family unity. Each child's unique journey toward maturity contributed to their collective strength as a family unit, while preparing them for independent success in their future endeavors. Gumball's development of genuine empathy and consideration for others transformed him from a potentially narcissistic child into a young person capable of leadership and collaboration, someone who could inspire and motivate others while maintaining consideration for their needs and perspectives. His creative talents and natural charisma became tools for building community and solving problems, rather than simply demanding attention and admiration. Darwin's moral clarity and emotional wisdom made him an invaluable counselor and mediator within the family and beyond, someone whose insights into human nature and ethical decision-making helped others navigate complex challenges with greater wisdom and compassion. His unique perspective on existence and consciousness provided philosophical depth that enriched everyone's understanding of what it meant to live meaningfully and responsibly. Anais's intellectual gifts and protective instincts established her as the family's strategic advisor and problem solver, someone whose analytical capabilities were guided by genuine love and commitment to her family's welfare, rather than abstract intellectual interests or personal ambition. Her ability to see patterns and predict outcomes made her an essential contributor to family decisions and long-term planning. The collaborative relationship that developed among the three siblings represented the successful integration of their individual strengths into a cohesive unit that was stronger and more capable than any of them could have been independently. Their different personalities and abilities complemented each other in ways that created natural checks and balances, preventing any single perspective from dominating their collective decisions, while ensuring that all important viewpoints were considered and respected. The adventures and challenges that they faced together became opportunities for each child to practice the skills and values they were developing while contributing to their siblings' growth and success. Gumball's creativity provided the vision and inspiration for their activities. Darwin's moral compass ensured that their choices reflected ethical considerations and concern for others, and Ananias's intelligence helped them navigate complex situations while avoiding potential problems and pitfalls. The relationship they maintained with their parents evolved as they matured, shifting from simple dependence to collaborative partnership while preserving the emotional security and unconditional love that remained the foundation of their family bonds. Their growing capabilities allowed them to contribute more significantly to household responsibilities and family decisions, while continuing to receive the guidance and support they needed for healthy development. The individual identities that each child developed while remaining closely connected to their family unit prepared them for eventual independence, while ensuring that their bonds would endure beyond childhood and continue to provide mutual support and enrichment throughout their lives. Their shared experiences and values created a foundation of trust and understanding that would serve them well as they faced future challenges and opportunities. The legacy of love and acceptance that Nicole and Richard had created through their parenting approaches was reflected in their children's ability to embrace their own uniqueness while appreciating the differences that made others special and valuable. This fundamental lesson in unconditional acceptance would guide their relationships and contributions throughout their lives, ensuring that the extraordinary love that had shaped their childhood would continue to influence the world through their actions and choices. The house at 43 Elmore Street had become more than just a home for three exceptional children and their devoted parents. It had evolved into a laboratory for human potential and family love, a place where the impossible became routine and where individual growth enhanced collective strength. The daily miracles of understanding, forgiveness, and creativity that occurred within its walls provided a model for what families could achieve when guided by wisdom, patience, and the recognition that love was not limited by conventional definitions or expectations. The trials that tested the Watterson family's unity and resilience came not as single dramatic events, but as an accumulation of pressures and challenges that gradually strained their resources, patience, and faith in their ability to overcome obstacles through love and mutual support alone. These crises emerged from both external circumstances beyond their control and internal tensions that developed as each family member's individual needs and aspirations sometimes conflicted with the collective good that had always guided their decision-making processes. The first major financial crisis struck when the Rainbow Factory underwent corporate restructuring that eliminated Nicole's position along with dozens of others, leaving their family without their primary source of income during a period when their expenses were higher than they had ever been. Gumball and Darwin were both involved in extracurricular activities that required equipment and fees. Anais needed specialized educational resources to accommodate her accelerated learning pace, and the house itself was beginning to show signs of wear that demanded repairs and maintenance they could no longer afford. Nicole's initial response to losing her job was a controlled panic that she attempted to hide from her family, while frantically searching for alternative employment that could provide similar income and benefits. Her professional identity had become so intertwined with her sense of self-worth and her ability to provide for her family that unemployment felt like a personal failure rather than simply an economic setback caused by forces beyond her individual control. The job search process revealed the extent to which Nicole's years of focused dedication to a single employer had limited her marketable skills and professional network, making it difficult for her to transition to other industries or companies that might offer comparable compensation and advancement opportunities. The interviews she attended were frustrating experiences that highlighted her lack of recent experience with job hunting and her difficulty in articulating her qualifications to employers unfamiliar with her work history and Forting Baycom. Achievements. Richard's attempts to contribute more significantly to the family's financial stability were hampered by his lack of formal credentials and his gentle personality that made him unsuitable for many positions that were available to Danjing, someone with his educational background. His applications for retail and service jobs were often unsuccessful, not because he lacked the necessary skills or intelligence, but because his approach to customer interaction was too thoughtful and genuine for environments that prioritized efficiency over empathy. The children's responses to their family's financial stress revealed both their individual character traits and their deep commitment to supporting their parents through difficult circumstances. Gumball immediately began brainstorming creative solutions that ranged from practical to fantastical, his optimistic energy providing emotional support even when his specific suggestions were not feasible. Darwin offered to give up his extracurricular activities and personal expenses to reduce the family's financial burden, his selfless concern for others' well-being typical of his character, but heartbreaking in its unnecessary sacrifice. Aeneas approached the crisis with characteristic analytical precision, researching government assistance programs, calculating their family's minimum survival budget, and developing multiple contingency plans that could help them weather extended unemployment while maintaining their household stability. Her practical intelligence provided valuable guidance during family meetings where they discussed potential strategies and necessary adjustments to their lifestyle and expectations. The community support that emerged during this difficult period demonstrated the extent to which the Watterson family's kindness and generosity toward others had created networks of friendship and mutual aid that proved invaluable when they needed help themselves. Neighbors offered assistance with groceries and household repairs. Friends provided job leads and professional references, and local business owners created temporary employment opportunities that helped them maintain basic financial stability while Nicole continued searching for permanent work. The strain that extended financial pressure placed on Richard and Nicole's marriage was subtle but significant, manifesting not in dramatic arguments or obvious resentment, but in the gradual erosion of the easy communication and shared decision-making that had always characterized their relationship. Nicole's stress about providing for their family made her more controlling and critical of household management, while Richard's feelings of inadequacy about his inability to replace her income led him to withdraw emotionally rather than risk adding to her burdens with his own concerns and frustrations. The children became unwilling witnesses to their parents' struggles, observing tensions and difficulties that their mother and father tried to shield them from but could not entirely conceal. This experience of seeing their seemingly invulnerable parents vulnerable and uncertain was both educational and traumatic, forcing them to mature in ways that provided valuable life lessons, but also created anxiety about their family's stability and future security. The second major crisis emerged from Aeneas's exceptional intelligence and her growing recognition that her intellectual capabilities were creating social and educational challenges that could not be resolved through conventional approaches. Her advanced coursework had accelerated to the point where she was working at high school and college levels while still being chronologically and emotionally an elementary school student, creating a disconnect between her academic achievements and her social development that was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. The isolation that accompanied her intellectual superiority was compounded by her growing awareness that her family, despite their love and support, could not provide the kind of intellectual companionship and stimulation that she needed for continued growth and development. Her conversations with her parents and siblings while emotionally satisfying, often lacked the analytical depth and complexity that her mind craved, leaving her feeling lonely despite being surrounded by people who cared deeply about her well-being. The educational decisions that needed to be made about Anais' future created conflicts between her intellectual needs and her emotional health, forcing Nicole and Richard to consider options that might provide better academic opportunities, but could potentially damage her social development and family relationships. The possibility of acceleration programs, specialized schools, or early college admission required them to weigh her exceptional capabilities against the value of normal childhood experiences and family stability. Anais herself was torn between her desire for intellectual challenge and her recognition that her family provided emotional security and unconditional love that might be difficult to find in more academically demanding environments. Her analytical mind could clearly see the advantages of educational opportunities that matched her capabilities, but her heart understood the importance of maintaining the relationships and home environment that had shaped her character and values. The third major crisis developed from Darwin's struggle to understand his identity and place in the world, as he matured from a child who accepted his unusual origins without question into an adolescent who began questioning the implications of his transformation and what it meant for his future relationships and life path. His growing awareness of his differences from other people created existential anxieties that affected his emotional stability and his relationships with family members and friends. The philosophical questions that had once seemed charming and precocious became sources of genuine distress as Darwin confronted the reality that his existence challenged fundamental assumptions about identity, consciousness, and belonging. He began to wonder whether his feelings and experiences were authentic or simply programmed responses, whether his love for his family was genuine emotion or instinctual attachment, and whether his future held the possibility of meaningful relationships with people who had not undergone similar transformations. The social challenges that accompanied Darwin's adolescence were complicated by his unique background and his difficulty in relating to peers who had never experienced the kind of fundamental identity transformation that had shaped his early development. His innocent approach to relationships, which had been endearing during childhood, became problematic as he attempted to form romantic connections and deep friendships with people who could not fully understand or appreciate his perspective on existence and consciousness. The fourth major crisis arose from Gumball's growing frustration with the limitations that his family's unconventional nature placed on his social aspirations and his desire for normalcy that would allow him to fit in more easily with his peers and their expectations. His creative talents and charismatic personality had made him popular at school, but his home life sometimes created situations that were difficult to explain or integrate with his developing social identity outside the family circle. The embarrassment that Gumball occasionally felt about his family's eccentricities conflicted with his genuine love and appreciation for their unique qualities, creating internal tension between his desire for social acceptance and his loyalty to the people who had always supported and nurtured his growth and development. His attempts to balance these competing priorities sometimes led to choices that hurt family members' feelings, while failing to achieve the social goals that had motivated his behavior. The romantic relationship that Gumball pursued with Penny became complicated by his difficulty in integrating his authentic family identity with the more conventional persona he felt pressured to maintain in social situations. His reluctance to fully share his home life with someone he cared about created barriers to intimacy that frustrated both him and Penny, while his family's hurt feelings about his apparent shame regarding their unconventional nature threatened the trust and openness that had always characterized their relationships. The resolution of these interconnected crises required the Watterson family to rediscover and recommit to the fundamental values and principles that had sustained them through earlier challenges, while adapting their approaches to accommodate the changed circumstances and increased complexity of their individual and collective needs. The process was neither quick nor easy, demanding honest communication, mutual sacrifice, and the kind of creative problem-solving that had always been their strength, but now needed to be applied to more serious and consequential challenges than they had previously faced. Nicole's eventual success in finding new employment came through a combination of persistent effort, creative networking, and the recognition that her previous career path might not be the only route to financial stability and professional fulfillment. The position she accepted involved a significant salary reduction and required her to develop new skills, but it provided the stability her family needed, while offering opportunities for growth and advancement that better matched her current life priorities and family responsibilities. The adjustments that all family members made to accommodate their reduced income involved both practical changes to their lifestyle and philosophical shifts in their understanding of what constituted success and happiness. They learned to find satisfaction in simpler pleasures, to appreciate the value of experiences over possessions, and to recognize that their emotional wealth far exceeded any material limitations that financial constraints might impose on their choices and opportunities. Aeneas's educational future was resolved through a carefully negotiated plan that provided intellectual challenges while maintaining her emotional connections to family and age-appropriate social experiences. The solution involved a combination of advanced coursework, mentorship opportunities, and specialized programs that allowed her to develop her exceptional capabilities without sacrificing the relationships and experiences that were essential for her overall development and happiness. Darwin's identity questions were addressed through family discussions that acknowledged the unique nature of his existence while affirming the authenticity of his feelings, relationships, and experiences. The conversations helped him understand that consciousness and identity were not diminished by unusual origins, and that his capacity for love, growth, and meaningful contribution to others' lives was not dependent on conventional biographical details, but on his choices and character. Gumball's struggles with balancing family loyalty and social acceptance were resolved through his growing recognition that authenticity was more valuable than conformity, and that relationships based on hiding important aspects of his identity were ultimately less satisfying than connections built on genuine understanding and acceptance. His decision to share more of his real family life with Penny and other friends led to deeper, more meaningful relationships that enhanced rather than threatened his connection to his family. The strengthened bonds that emerged from navigating these crises together demonstrated the Watterson family's resilience and their ability to grow stronger through adversity rather than being weakened by it. Each challenge had tested different aspects of their relationships and revealed areas where growth and adjustment were needed, but the fundamental love and commitment that held them together had proven capable of sustaining them through even the most difficult circumstances. The lessons learned during this period of testing became integrated into their family culture and approach to future challenges, providing them with greater confidence in their ability to handle whatever difficulties might arise while maintaining their essential unity and mutual support. They had discovered that their love for each other was not dependent on ideal circumstances or the absence of problems, but was strong enough to endure and overcome whatever obstacles life might present. The external recognition that their family received from community members and institutions who had observed their ability to handle adversity with grace and unity provided validation for their unconventional approaches and reinforcement for their belief that love could indeed conquer any challenge. When combined with patience, creativity, and unwavering commitment to each other's well-being and happiness. The model they had developed for resolving conflicts and overcoming obstacles became an inspiration for other families facing similar challenges, demonstrating that strength came not from avoiding difficulties, but from facing them together with honesty, creativity, and the kind of unconditional love that transforms ordinary people into extraordinary families, capable of achieving remarkable things through their unity and mutual dedication. The eternal present that defined daily life at 43 Elmore Street existed not as a static state of unchanging routine, but as a flowing river of moments where the extraordinary had become so thoroughly integrated with the ordinary that the distinction between magical and mundane had dissolved into something approaching pure contentment. Each sunrise brought with it the promise of new adventures and discoveries, while each sunset provided opportunities for reflection on the small miracles and gentle revelations that filled their days with meaning and joy. The morning rituals that began each day in the Watterson household had evolved over the years into a complex choreography of individual needs and collective harmony, where every family member's unique requirements were accommodated within a framework of mutual consideration and shared purpose. These routines were never exactly the same from one day to the next, for the family had learned that flexibility and adaptation were essential ingredients in maintaining happiness when dealing with the unpredictable nature of their extraordinary circumstances. Richard's awakening typically preceded the rest of the family by 30 or 40 minutes, providing him with precious solitude for the quiet contemplation that prepared his spirit for another day of nurturing and supporting the remarkable individuals who depended on his gentle wisdom and unwavering love. These early morning moments of stillness were not empty spaces to be filled with activity, but sacred intervals where he could connect with his deepest sense of purpose and gratitude for the life he had been blessed to live. The kitchen became his first sanctuary of the day, where the preparation of breakfast transformed from mere domestic necessity into a meditation on abundance and care. The eggs he cracked with deliberate precision, the bread he toasted to exactly the right shade of golden brown, the juice he squeezed from fresh oranges, each action was performed with the kind of mindful attention that recognized cooking as an act of love made manifest through practical service to those who mattered most. Nicole's emergence from sleep was accompanied by the systematic mental review of the day's obligations and opportunities that had become second nature during her years of balancing career advancement with family devotion. Even before her feet touched the bedroom floor, her mind was already organizing priorities, anticipating challenges, and developing strategies that would allow her to meet professional expectations, while ensuring that her family's needs received the attention and care they deserved. The transformation she underwent each morning had become less jarring over the years, as she had gradually learned to integrate her maternal identity with her professional persona, rather than treating them as completely separate and incompatible aspects of her character. The fierce protectiveness that made her such a devoted mother also fueled her success in the corporate environment, while the analytical skills that served her well at work proved invaluable in managing the complex logistics of their unconventional household. Gumball's awakening was typically announced by the sound of energetic movement and creative vocalizations that suggested his dreams had been filled with adventures and possibilities that his waking mind was eager to explore and develop. His transition from sleep to consciousness was never gradual or peaceful, but rather an explosive emergence that filled the house with the kind of vibrant energy that other families might have found disruptive, but the Wattersons had learned to appreciate as one of his most endearing characteristics. The creative projects that he began planning before he was fully dressed often involved elaborate scenarios that would require the participation and cooperation of every family member, his imagination generating storylines and character assignments that transformed ordinary Tuesday mornings into theatrical productions worthy of professional entertainment. His ability to see dramatic potential in mundane circumstances was both a gift that enriched their family life and a challenge that required patient guidance from parents who understood the importance of balancing creative expression with practical responsibilities. Darwin's gentle awakening reflected his fundamental approach to existence, moving from sleep to consciousness with the kind of peaceful transition that suggested someone who was comfortable with both states of being and felt no urgent need to rush from one to the other. His first conscious moments were typically spent in quiet observation of his surroundings, taking inventory of the sounds and sensations that indicated another day of possibilities was beginning in the home where he had discovered love, purpose, and identity. The philosophical questions that often occupied his early morning thoughts were not abstract intellectual exercises, but genuine inquiries into the nature of existence, consciousness, and moral responsibility that reflected his ongoing process of understanding what it meant to be alive and aware in ways that transcended his unusual origins. These contemplations provided the foundation for the ethical guidance and emotional wisdom that made him such a valuable contributor to family discussions and decision-making processes. Aeneas's awakening was characterized by the immediate mental clarity and analytical focus that marked all her activities. Her transition from sleep to consciousness so smooth and efficient that she often seemed to have been awake and thinking long before her physical movements indicated that she had actually left the realm of dreams. Her mind began processing information and generating insights from the moment her eyes opened, approaching each new day as an opportunity for learning and intellectual growth. The complex observations and analytical assessments that filled her early morning thoughts reflected her ongoing efforts to understand the world around her, while finding ways to contribute meaningfully to her family's happiness and success, despite her young age and the social limitations it imposed on her ability to act independently. Her intelligence was never a burden she carried alone, but rather a gift she shared generously with the people she loved most. The breakfast conversations that brought the family together each morning had evolved into one of their most cherished traditions, providing opportunities for each member to share their plans, concerns, and observations while receiving support and input from others who understood their unique perspectives and challenges. These discussions were never hurried or superficial, but rather genuine exchanges of information and emotion that strengthened their bonds while helping each individual prepare for the day ahead. The meal itself was typically an eclectic combination of foods that reflected each family member's preferences and dietary requirements, creating colorful and sometimes unusual combinations that might have seemed strange to outside observers, but represented the kind of creative compromise that characterized all their family decisions. Richard's cooking had become increasingly sophisticated over the years, incorporating techniques and ingredients that accommodated everyone's tastes while ensuring proper nutrition and visual appeal. The school preparation routines that followed breakfast were orchestrated with the precision of a military operation, though executed with the warmth and humor that made even the most mundane tasks feel like opportunities for connection and mutual support. Book bags were packed with careful attention to each child's specific needs. Lunch boxes were filled with foods chosen to provide both nutrition and comfort during the challenging hours away from home, and last-minute concerns were addressed with patience and understanding. The brief family meetings that sometimes occurred during these preparation periods served as opportunities to coordinate schedules, address potential conflicts, and ensure that everyone understood their responsibilities and expectations for the day ahead. These discussions were conducted with the kind of democratic spirit that recognized each family member as having valuable input and legitimate concerns, regardless of their age or formal authority within the household structure. The farewell rituals that marked the family's temporary separation each weekday morning had become increasingly elaborate and meaningful over the years, reflecting their understanding that these daily partings required acknowledgement and ceremony to maintain the emotional connections that sustained them through hours of physical separation. Hugs were exchanged with genuine affection. Words of encouragement were offered with heartfelt sincerity, and promises to share the day's experiences were made with the kind of commitment that recognized these exchanges as sacred obligations. Nicole's departure for work was accompanied by the complex emotional mixture of determination and reluctance that characterized her ongoing struggle to balance professional success with family devotion. Her briefcase contained not only the documents and materials necessary for another day of corporate achievement, but also photographs and mementos that served as reminders of what truly mattered and why her sacrifices were worthwhile. The children's journey to school became opportunities for continued bonding and mutual support, with Gumball's enthusiasm and creative energy providing entertainment and distraction, Darwin's gentle wisdom offering comfort and perspective when challenges arose, and Aeneas's analytical intelligence helping to solve practical problems and navigate complex social situations. Richard's time alone in the empty house was never experienced as loneliness or abandonment, but rather as peaceful interlude that allowed him to recharge his emotional batteries while preparing their home environment for the family's eventual return. His domestic activities were performed with the kind of meditative attention that transformed routine housework into expressions of love and care for the people whose comfort and happiness depended on his efforts. The cleaning and organizing that occupied much of his morning were approached not as chores to be completed as quickly as possible, but as opportunities to create beauty and order that would enhance his family's quality of life when they returned home. His attention to detail ensured that every surface was not merely clean but welcoming. Every room was organized for both function and aesthetic appeal, and every aspect of their living environment reflected the love and care that made their house a true sanctuary. The afternoon hours, when the children returned from school, marked the beginning of the day's most intensive period of family interaction, as homework, supervision, creative projects, and social activities competed for attention while dinner preparations and household management continued in the background. These busy hours required all of Richard's patience and organizational skills to ensure that everyone's needs received appropriate attention while maintaining the peaceful atmosphere that made their home a refuge from external pressures and demands. The individual attention that each child required during these after-school hours reflected their unique personalities and developmental needs while contributing to the family's collective harmony and success. Gumball's creative projects often required space, materials, and audience participation that could disrupt other activities if not carefully managed. Darwin's need for emotional processing and social guidance required patient listening and thoughtful responses that addressed his concerns while building his confidence and understanding. Aeneas's advanced academic work sometimes required research assistance and intellectual engagement that challenged Richard's own knowledge and capabilities, while providing opportunities for mutual learning and growth. Her willingness to share her insights and discoveries with other family members transformed her individual achievements into collective enrichment that benefited everyone's understanding and appreciation of the world around them. The dinner preparation that began in late afternoon was a collaborative process that involved every family member according to their abilities and availability, creating opportunities for conversation and cooperation, while producing meals that nourished both body and spirit. The kitchen became a gathering place where the day's experiences were shared, challenges were discussed, and plans for the evening and following day were developed through democratic consultation and compromise. Nicole's return from work marked the completion of their daily circle, her presence restoring the family to its full configuration and allowing the evening's activities to begin in earnest. Her transition from professional mode to maternal identity had become smoother over the years, though it still required conscious effort and patience from everyone involved as she readjusted to the different rhythms and expectations of home life. The dinner conversations that brought them together around the table each evening were sacred rituals that reinforced their connections while providing opportunities for each family member to receive individual attention and recognition for their daily accomplishments and struggles. These discussions often ranged widely across topics that reflected their diverse interests and experiences, creating educational opportunities that complemented formal schooling while building understanding and empathy among family members. The evening activities that followed dinner were carefully balanced to provide both individual space and family bonding time, accommodating everyone's need for personal interests, while maintaining the relationships and shared experiences that kept them connected, despite their different personalities and developmental stages. Television programs were selected through negotiation and compromise. Games were chosen to include everyone, regardless of age or ability, and quiet activities were available for those who needed peaceful alternatives to group entertainment. The bedtime routines that concluded each day were perhaps the most precious hours in their daily schedule, providing opportunities for intimate one-on-one connections between parents and children, while ensuring that everyone felt loved, secure, and prepared for peaceful sleep. These individual interactions were tailored to each child's needs and preferences, creating special bonds and shared memories that would endure long after the specific conversations were forgotten. The brief adult time that Nicole and Richard shared after the children were asleep provided essential opportunities for partnership maintenance and personal connection, allowing them to process their own experiences while planning for future challenges and opportunities. These conversations were crucial for maintaining the strong foundation that supported their entire family structure and enabled them to meet their various responsibilities while preserving their individual identities and relationship satisfaction. The quiet moments that marked the end of each day were filled with gratitude and contentment rather than exhaustion and stress, reflecting their success in creating a lifestyle that honored everyone's needs while maintaining the love and harmony that made their extraordinary family possible. The house at 43 Elmore Street settled into peaceful rest each night, with the satisfaction that comes from days well lived and love well expressed, ready to awaken to new possibilities and adventures when morning returned with its promise of continued growth and joy. The legacy that emerged from these accumulated days of ordinary magic was not measured in external achievements or material acquisitions, but in the quality of relationships and the depth of understanding that connected 5 unique individuals in bonds that transcended conventional definitions of family and success. Their influence extended beyond their household boundaries, touching the lives of everyone who encountered their example of what was possible when love-guided decisions and acceptance created space for individual authenticity within collective harmony. And so we reach the end of our journey through the extraordinary ordinary life of the Watterson family. Though in truth, their story has no ending, only new beginnings with each sunrise over Elmore, each shared meal around their kitchen table, each moment of laughter that echoes through the halls of 43 Elmore Street. In a world that often demands conformity and perfection, that insists on narrow definitions of success and happiness, they stand as beacons of beautiful imperfection, showing us that love comes in countless forms and that family is defined not by DNA or species or conventional expectations, but by the bonds we choose to honor and nurture with patient devotion and unwavering acceptance. The legacy they have created through their daily choices and their commitment to each other transcends the boundaries of their modest suburban home, rippling outward through their community and beyond, in ways that touch every life they encounter. Their example demonstrates that the most profound revolutions begin not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with the quiet decision to love unconditionally, to accept without reservation, and to create space where differences are celebrated rather than merely tolerated. Richard's gentle wisdom, earned through years of choosing kindness over aggression and understanding over judgment, has shown that strength comes not from dominance or control, but from the courage to remain vulnerable and open-hearted, even when the world seems determined to reward harder, more cynical approaches to relationships and challenges. His daily demonstrations that patience and empathy can solve problems that force and cleverness cannot have created a foundation of trust and security that allows everyone in his family to take risks, make mistakes, and grow into their authentic selves without fear of rejection or abandonment. Nicole's fierce devotion, expressed through her willingness to sacrifice personal comfort and immediate gratification for her family's long-term well-being and security, has proven that love is not a passive emotion, but an active choice that requires courage, determination, and the kind of strategic thinking that transforms noble intentions into practical results. Her daily transformation from nurturing mother to corporate warrior and back again has shown that we can honor multiple aspects of our identity without losing our essential self, that we can adapt to circumstances without betraying our core values and commitments. Gumball's creative chaos, channeled through years of learning to consider others' needs alongside his own desires and ambitions, has evolved into the kind of leadership that inspires rather than demands, that builds community rather than seeking dominance, that uses imagination and energy to solve problems and create joy for everyone involved. His journey from self-centered child to empathetic young person has demonstrated that growth is possible at any age, that our worst tendencies can be transformed into our greatest strengths when guided by love and supported by patient understanding. Darwin's pure heart, sustained through the complex transition from pet to person to moral guide, has provided an unwavering compass that points toward truth, compassion, and the kind of ethical clarity that comes from experiencing existence from multiple perspectives while never losing sight of what truly matters. His evolution from simple goldfish to the family's conscience and counselor has shown that consciousness and wisdom are not limited by origins or circumstances, that the capacity for love and moral growth transcends any boundaries we might try to impose on the nature of personhood and identity. Anais' protective intelligence, balanced by her deep emotional connection to her family despite her intellectual superiority, has proven that knowledge without love is empty, while love guided by wisdom can accomplish miracles that neither could achieve independently. Her role as the family's strategic advisor and problem solver has shown that true genius lies not in abstract intellectual achievement, but in the application of exceptional abilities to the service of others' happiness and well-being. Together, they have created something unprecedented and beautiful, a family where differences are not just accepted but valued as essential contributions to their collective strength, where individual gifts are recognized and nurtured without creating hierarchy or competition, where mistakes are treated as opportunities for learning and growth rather than failures deserving punishment or shame. Their household has become a sanctuary where the impossible becomes routine because it is surrounded by the kind of unconditional love that makes any transformation or achievement possible. The daily miracles that occur within their walls, the conversations that bridge species and generations, the creative solutions that emerge from collaborative problem solving, the moments of grace and forgiveness that heal wounds and strengthen bonds, have created a model for what human relationships can become when guided by wisdom, patience, and the fundamental recognition that every individual deserves to be loved exactly as they are, while being supported in becoming everything they have the potential to be. Their influence on the broader community of Elmore has been profound but subtle, changing hearts and minds not through preaching or propaganda, but through the simple example of what becomes possible when a group of people decide to build their lives on foundation of mutual respect and unlimited acceptance. Other families have been inspired to embrace their own eccentricities, to celebrate rather than hide their differences, to approach challenges with creativity and humor rather than fear and defensiveness. The children who have grown up knowing the Watterson family have learned lessons about diversity, acceptance, and the nature of love that will guide their own relationships and choices throughout their lives. They have seen that families can take many forms, that happiness comes from connection rather than conformity, that the most extraordinary magic often emerges from the most ordinary moments when approached with open hearts and willing spirits. The ripple effects of their example continue to spread through time and space, touching lives they will never know about, inspiring choices they will never witness, creating possibilities they can barely imagine. Their quiet revolution of love and acceptance has planted seeds of transformation that will continue growing long after the specific circumstances of their story have become distant memories, proving that the greatest legacies are not built from grand accomplishments or public recognition, but from the daily choice to love without limits and to create space where everyone belongs. As you drift towards sleep tonight, let yourself imagine the warmth and acceptance that fills every corner of 43 Elmore Street, where morning light streams through windows that have witnessed countless moments of joy and discovery, where every room holds memories of laughter and learning, where every piece of furniture and every cherished possession tells stories of a family that chose love over fear, understanding over judgment, and possibility over limitation. Picture Richard humming contentedly as he prepares another day's worth of carefully crafted meals, each dish an expression of devotion translated into nourishment and care. Envision Nicole reviewing her calendar not with stress and anxiety, but with pride and satisfaction, knowing that her sacrifices have created security and opportunity for the people who matter most. See Gumball sketching plans for adventures that will bring joy and excitement to everyone involved, his creativity now guided by wisdom and consideration for others' happiness. Imagine Darwin sitting quietly in their garden, observing the natural world with the same wonder and philosophical curiosity that has made him such a valuable moral compass for his family, his insights continuing to deepen as he grows into his role as counselor and guide. Picture Anais reading advanced texts while simultaneously keeping one ear tuned to her family's conversations, always ready to contribute her intelligence to their collective well-being, while never losing sight of what truly matters in life. Rest now in the knowledge that even in the darkest nights, when hope seems nothing more than a distant memory and love feels like an impossible dream, there are families like the Wattersons who prove every day that miracles are not supernatural events, but natural consequences of choosing compassion over cynicism, acceptance over rejection, and faith in possibility over resignation to limitation. Their story continues with each new dawn, each shared smile, each moment of connection that proves love is stronger than any obstacle the world can present. The legend of 43 Elmore Street endures, not because it is fiction, but because it represents truths about family, love, and human potential that transcend any single story or specific circumstances, showing us all what becomes possible when we dare to love without reservation and create homes where every heart can find acceptance, every dream can take root, and every soul can flourish in the warmth of unconditional devotion and unlimited possibility.